Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Pickens County Board of County Commissioners work session on Tuesday, August 3rd. I'm Kelly McNicholas Curry, the chair of the board. Here in the room with me is Vice Chair Patty Clapper, County Manager John Peacock, and joining us from home are other board members, Francie Jacober and Greg Poshman, and I believe Steve Child will be joining us as well on Zoom. And we will start off, just a preview, folks, we have a short work session, and then we will be going into a joint meeting with the City of Aspen, which may be of interest to some of you. That starts at 4 o'clock, and will also be broadcast on Grassroots on this channel just in a short while. And so with that, our first BOCC work session item is an update on the Recovery and Resiliency Roadmap, and we have Kara Silvernago, who's our assistant to the county manager, to present on this item. Hi, Kara.
Hi, Kelly. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. So I have a presentation, so let me share my screen. Can you all see that?
We sure can.
Just wanted to give an update about the Recovery and Resiliency Roadmap process. As some of you may recall, Pickens County submitted an application to the Department of Local Affairs on behalf of the Roaring Fork Valley back in April or May as part of this grant fund that the state received for basically a 2-year recovery and resiliency roadmap, and we were awarded Since we've been awarded, the state as well as us locally have been trying to understand a little bit more what the process is, what we're embarking on, and where do we move forward. So that's really what I'm here today. There's probably a lot of questions, which I look forward to hearing from all of you. I know I still have some questions too, but I just want to share with what we know today, get some feedback from all of you, and then kind of what we know and expectations as we continue to move forward. So quick overview, what is the roadmap process? It is through the Department of Local Affairs and Office of Economic Development and International Trade, OEDIT, for a basically 2-year technical assistance program to address regional recovery and resiliency in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is a statewide program. There are 16 teams across the state that were selected and awarded. So all of the logistics and kind of how this process plays out is really coming down through our state partners, and we are really engaging in it as just kind of our regional conversations. So what we don't know and what's still to be determined is we do know that there is no direct funding right now associated with this project. And because that this was basically a federal grant that the state received, there is also limited funding within that technical assistance that we will receive through the state. And some of that will come into play, I think, as we continue these conversations of what will we gain through the state process and where might we need to find areas locally or regionally to perhaps augment that to meet the needs that we see are necessary for our community. So why did we apply? Because there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of uncertainty around this. Is twofold. One, it's a unique opportunity to have a long-term vision process to gather our regional partners, gather a lot of diverse stakeholders at the table to really talk about what we see as the next iteration for our region and our community, and also really create an implementation plan and funding strategy. We know that there's a lot of various funding resources through the American Rescue Plan dollars, potentially other sources of funding, and so coming together on a regional scale to both identify the issues and then ideally have, who and where are the best places to then pursue potential funding opportunities. So quick overview, this is the first bite at the apple. By all means, this is not a kind of in stone, but what was in our application was really to use this process again for addressing those long-term, what we see as, those next 5-year issues, 10-year issues that are facing our community and our region. I should clarify, we defined the region as Aspen to Glenwood, so the Roaring Fork Valley. And as we started talking with some of our partners, both in the nonprofit sector, the business sector, and other jurisdictions, the theme that continued to emerge was what is necessary for the sustainability and resiliency of our workforce, because that really is the foundation for our community and our economy. And so really what we want to do is look at how we can build off past successes that this region is kind of known for to really address today's issues. So we pitched it as a little bit of a community visioning process. For some of you that may be aware, others in the 1990s, there was the Healthy Communities project that really brought together an entire regional effort to say, what are the values of our community and how do we go about addressing those? One of the outcomes of that effort was actually the Healthy Community Fund, which I think has made really dynamic changes in our community. And so wanting to use this opportunity that the state is offering for potentially being able to have those big idea conversations again, and then use some of the federal funding that might be available for implementation. And as well as engage a diversity of stakeholders and community voices to really, again, be a part of what does it mean to have a sustainable and resilient workforce. So, so the partners thus far, again, not comprehensive. This is step one. This will continue to be a process. Is that we did work with all of our local jurisdictions and counties. I will share that Garfield County at the time, because we weren't sure how we were breaking up, wants to be informed, and part of the conversations has not yet committed, but that was at the time of application, so we will be circling back with them as we start to learn more. And then really wanting to identify who are those champions for the other sectors. So the chamber associations, the nonprofit community, potentially large employers or other state and local agencies that, such as RAFTA or something that might need to be a part of these conversations. And then at the state level, the state has hired recovery project managers to help lead this effort through OEdit. So they are really going to help be our logistics coordination, kind of keep us moving along. Our regional managers through DOLA, and then community builders across the state is kind of coming up with this framework for all the different teams to participate on. I'm going to pause. There's a lot going on, so I'm going to pause for questions, and then I'll move into some details about the DOLA process.
Okay, I see a hand from Greg, then Patty.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Cara. Yeah, when I first saw this, I thought, oh, it sounds really interesting, but there's no money involved, and there's a lot of work involved, and really, where is this going? And so I was trepidatious at first. So I'd like to find out what you think in terms of, who's going to be doing this on our side, and I'm guessing it's closer to you because you're the one bringing it here. How interested are you in this, and what do you see as potential for it? But also, I have some questions, like who are the community builders? And when people come in saying they're community builders, I immediately become suspicious because I'm much less interested in building a larger community than I am in maybe creating a sustainable, steady state community. And I wonder if that's part of the conversation, or is this just about economic development? And I think I know the answer, but I want to make sure that that's part of the conversation, because if this is about how we can grow our community bigger, I'm frankly not interested. But if it's about how we can become, more resilient and sustainable, I like those words. Maybe aim for steady state and equity, and the important words, without the idea that we're trying to grow it bigger. That's a conversation I'd really love us to be part of. And I'm just wondering, will that even be part of it? I don't see environmental groups or advocates for quality of life in this. I see advocates for growing things bigger on these lists. And so that would be my first question.
So I'm going to take the easy one first, Greg. So Community Builders is actually an organization. They happen to be based out of Glenwood Springs, but they're kind of a land use planning and a community conversation nonprofit. So their whole focus is on how to bring community engagement into kind of the visioning process. They were actually selected by the state. So they are a consultant under the state program to help kind of develop the framework for this project. So just want to clarify, Community Builders is an entity, not a generic term of who's going to be at the table. And I think as far as your other questions, that's the feedback that we're looking for. I think the dynamic is we do really want to be looking on the focus on this resiliency and sustainability of the workforce and the economy, not necessarily a growing, but knowing all the pressures that we're seeing post-COVID, how do we find a space to start to address the multitude of issues and have the right folks at the table to be a part of those. So I think making sure that we include some environment and quality of life representation as well into the conversation is really important.
Great, thanks.
Okay, Patty, then Steve.
Yeah, Kara,
Oh,
thanks.
and your level of enthusiasm. Sorry.
Well, that's putting me on the spot. So right now, I am helping facilitate it. So I think it will sit somewhere under kind of my new role with the county. And then we are also looking at some organizational shifts that have been happening, of potentially bringing someone on that can be helping carry not necessarily this project, but the themes and the goals of this project, such as related to workforce resiliency, likely housing. And I think that's something that we're looking at bringing back to the board later this year.
Thanks, Kara. Patty and then Steve.
Yeah, I noticed in your agenda item summary, you listed the partners, and I did not see Snowmass Village Chamber on there. Is that part of Snowmass Village, or is that just, I know there'll be a partner.
They're part of Snowmass
Okay.
Village.
Okay, so one and the same. Okay, I just want to clarify that. You talked about the, what was it, the Healthy Communities study? That was Colin Laird, right? Is he still, I haven't seen or heard of him. Is he still involved in, because he does have a lot of institutional history in this.
He is doing work at the 3rd Street Center. And Kara, do you know exactly what Colin is doing down there?
I don't know exactly what he's doing, but I think we would want to at least reach out and see if he has any capacity to even just share lesson learned from that effort.
Great, great. And then looking at the partners you've listed here on the screen, all but one are members of Northwest Colorado Council of Governments. Carbondale used to be a member and is not currently. Not that we don't hope to get them back in the fold. But the other, so I think Northwest COG, especially with the mountain migration study, et cetera, we really need to bring them in on this. And also the Economic Development District with Rachel at Northwest COG. She's got a lot of information, a lot of experience, a lot of contacts at regional, state levels and beyond, which may provide us some funding opportunities possibly, or just data. But I think that would be another great resource for us to add to this effort. And I think we also need to keep looking at DOLA and to the state government for great idea, and we need your help in funding these efforts, at least helping us come up with a list of projects, and then we can look for funding more specifically in the future. So thanks, Kara.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
So I really like seeing this, Kara, this kind of effort, a community effort to improve the community, to me is really important. Rocky Mountain Institute used to have, and I don't know if they still do have, they might, sort of a community development branch of staff at Rocky Mountain Institute. Michael Kinsley was heavily involved in that. That was his main position there when he last was working at RMI. But he would go into a community and look with the community members to see what the strengths and weaknesses in the community were and how they could build upon their strengths for developing businesses or, better paying, geared toward, was trying to keep their money on Main Street, is what sticks in my mind. They wanted local businesses where local people are getting, their lives are better, they're getting a better paying job, and they're spending their money buying from other local businesses in that community. And that way they keep the money circulating on Main Street rather than having it go to a big out of town or out of state corporation somewhere, siphoning money out of the community. And that's how I could envision this working for making the community more resilient and perhaps helping develop some new small local industries that would just give more diversity and more stability to the labor pool and the jobs available. Also, it might also help people cut down on their commuting if they can have a job closer to home for one. Maybe it'd be one family member working without having to commute so much. I would say, in looking at the nonprofit community, that the Valley, Mountain Valley, let's see, I can't remember the name of the mountain, shoot, I can't remember the name of it, the Valley Settlement Group.
Valley Settlement Project.
Yeah, Valley Settlement Project. So that we should talk to them too, and just there's a whole broad range of organizations involved in that, and I think we should include them in the discussions. So thanks for doing this, appreciate it.
Okay, and I'll just chime in a little bit. I'll probably have more to say as you finish up here, Kara, but I really hope that the Basalt Chamber signs on in particular because of their kind of newly stood up business incubator effort. I'd be curious to what their lessons learned have been along those lines, which I think sets it apart from the other chambers. Okay. Are there other questions for Kara right now?
Not now.
Okay, let's keep going.
And just to both Kelly, yours, and Patty's questions, I just abbreviated the chambers, but every chamber in the Valley, Glenwood, Carbondale, Basalt, Aspen, as well as Go Snowmass, wrote letters of support for engaging in this process. So we do have all of them that will engage with us. So just to answer that quick question. I'm recognizing short of time, I'm gonna go through the DOLA process at a pretty high level, but if you have specifics, just let me know. So again, quick overview, 16 regional teams. I will share Pitkin County was awarded for the Roaring Fork Valley. Eagle County also submitted an application and was awarded to cover all of the Eagle County, which includes the Eagle River Valley and Roaring Fork Valley. So part of this first phase is that we're working really closely with Eagle County as far as what their project is going to be, how we coordinate the two, where we're aligned, and where Eagle County might need to do something separate for the Eagle River Valley that might not apply here. So I just want you to be aware, because you'll probably hear how Eagle County is intertwined within this project, as well as might be a little bit separated. But we are working really closely together on our efforts. And so here is the process as we know it today. There's essentially 3 phases that DOLA is embarking on over this 2-year period. The first phase, they're calling this groundwork. It's really just getting the teams together. What do we want out of the project? It's a little bit of probably what I'm doing today, but with much better facilitation of what's the goals, how do we work together, who are the people at the table. Really, the crux of this project lies within phase 2, which is a consultant will come on board specific to our region, work with the team to basically, on those goals that we identify, work with basically building out the roadmap and then moving into implementation. Phase 2 and phase 3 are a little bit fuzzy, but we'll continue to upgrade, but that's kind of the big picture of what we're working on. So again, the groundwork phase is kind of through that August through October, with the consultant piece coming on board in probably about that October timeframe at this point, which really is just getting some of the folks that you all already mentioned, getting them at the table, understanding what level of involvement do they want to have in this, and how do we all work together, make it efficient for people's times, as well as valuable for their time and for the community. So really, the first piece that we're about to embark on is this Roaring Fork Valley kickoff meeting. And I think what's important to share here is that it's really, this is the opportunity for us to define what we want our project to be. I was actually working with community builders earlier this morning to understand a little bit more about this project. And I think what is really helpful for us to think about is that we want to use this DOLA roadmap as kind of this long-term community visioning, kind of big picture innovation and creativity. That's not to say that there are not immediate needs for workforce resiliency and sustainability that we're facing now. So also starting to come up with what is the path to address those immediate needs, as well as kind of staying engaged in this long-term vision process, and where do they run parallel and where do they start to diverge or come together. And so that's, again, not identifying the specifics, but identifying the process so that there's a path to address both issues is really the first step that we're looking to set up in this pre-groundwork phase in August. So just a couple other quick slides. There's other considerations that I'm sure you all have heard, and I know we've heard from some of our community members that's also influencing this process, which is the ARPA funding. There is multitude of funding sources out there that can probably be used for some of this funding for implementation. So one of the goals is, again, that while Pickens County receives its direct disbursement, it's really using this process to set our community up to be competitive for all these other funding sources outside of Pickens County's direct disbursement, and identifying who are those partners, who's the transportation arm that's best suited to apply for transportation funding that we see as part of this issue, housing, whatever kind of the various issues may be. So we're just trying to bring everyone along, understanding that our best competitive edge for pursuing some of this ARPA funding is to come together as a region and identify those priorities that we need to address, what we're all seeing as the issues in the Valley right now. So this is a busy slide, and I know I ran through that really quick, but really the conversation that we wanted to have here today with the board is, one, just an update, but two, kind of giving your feedback on what are those issues that are part of this workforce resiliency umbrella that need to be part of the conversation, and how do we kind of, with so many unknowns in the process, how do we continue to engage with you all and communicate it as we move forward? How do you all want to be engaged in this process? So, sorry, it was very quick, but open it up for questions and feedback and discussion.
Okay, Francie, then Greg.
I just wanted to say that so much of our workforce are Latinx people, and so I hope that we can figure out a way to get them involved with this process. I don't know which Latino organization would be the right one, but there are several that we could tap into. I think that would be really important. And I would also like to see somebody involved with this who represents our undocumented population. There are some lawyers, especially down Valley, who specialize in that and who really help people get through the process of becoming documented or how to protect themselves, that kind of thing. So I think the Latino population in general, and then specifically people who represent, I mean, an undocumented person probably might be very hesitant to come forward, but somebody who represents them. And, there are quite a few lawyers and other nonprofit people who do that work.
Thanks, Francie. Greg?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and I'm thinking, wow, who should be at the table when it comes down to just defining what the scope of work is. And I certainly would love to see representatives from CORE, people who are tuned into our climate action objectives, and there should be a climate action plan as part of this entire thing. I'm also just wondering, how much will ComDev be involved in this, and our planners that are already working on big questions like this and have been. We may have some things filed away or forgotten or in process that could really contribute to this, and I want to make sure we're not duplicating efforts or ignoring existing plans. And I know that might get complicated because it's regional rather than just countywide. But I think we need to have those minds involved in at the table. And so a list of who's going to participate in this would be, certainly as Francie points out, certainly the Latino community would be essential, as would environmental community and climate-oriented community. And then I could go on. I'm thinking, wow, just virtually every department we have would have a voice here or might need to. Thanks.
I'll jump in a little bit here and then we can wrap it up. But, thanks, Kara. I mean, I think, in the last 18 months, we've really seen our local economy ping pong in unexpected ways due to the pandemic. And, the opportunity here is really coming out of that to identify what did we learn and, what is weak and what is strong. And I guess I'm finding myself wondering if the central questions are related to, are we trying to fortify what we already do, or are we trying to transform, into a stronger place or for stronger outcomes? And I think that will be an important first question for the group to wrestle with. And maybe there's a balance there, but trying to do things quickly and trying to cause transformation are not always in line with each other. And so I would, just, I guess, hope to inspire courage in the group to move quickly and, I think from the big picture. I don't think we need to wrestle too much over questions related to housing and childcare. We know those are central to a strong workforce here. And if there's action to take to fortify those, let's do it. And let's, do it regionally and through stronger regional partners, which I think is what the ARP funding is intended to do, honestly. And then try and really dig in of where are we weaker and where can our communities be stronger through some workforce transition, so that we aren't experiencing the ping-ponging, and likewise so our workers are not hitting the thresholds of despair before they're kind of slingshotted back from the brink into an on-fire economy on the reverse side. And so with that, I think the board does have to wrestle with how do we want to stay involved here. And I'll look for some answers or look for some discussion on that while we wrap up. Thoughts, Patty?
Yeah, I have a thought. Since we no longer have John Peacock's brief and very succinct COVID updates, maybe we could just start scheduling some periodic regular time. Kara, when you feel the need to keep us in the loop or need some direction, until such time as you really need or don't need us to jump in feet first, so that we just know what's going on. And I think it's important for us to have an understanding of that. So maybe we can look at that if that works out for everybody.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. That sounds good. Francie?
I'm just wondering what the other commissioners are doing, like from Eagle or from the town boards. Are they just sending staff, or are they going to have a representative on this? Do you know, Kara?
I do not know. I think right now, thus far, the conversations have been keeping it staff and doing updates to the respective boards until we know a little bit more about the process. Trying to muddle through the weeds a little bit has been the discussions thus far.
Okay, thanks.
Greg?
Yeah, I'm just wondering at what point, and is there plans for a public outreach, just to reach out to, thinking the list, it's like, well, somebody from RAFTA should really be part of this, and somebody from the Watershed Biodiversity Project should be part of this, and I'm just wondering, will there be a solicitation or invitations going out for people to participate from the public?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something we've marked as wanting to be integrated into this process. Again, is that this groundwork phase or this consultant phase? I don't think we know that, but we have marked we know for our region, we're gonna probably wanna go out to our community in a meaningful way to probably a little bit more robust than a survey to get some feedback.
And I'll just chime in on that a little bit. I mean, I really think we should dig in with, our workers. Like what would thriving look like for, the workers in our community? Would they want different careers? Would they want their current careers to look differently? I think that would be an important question to understand as well. And, Kara, I'm sure if you guys need someone to help with kicking off this process, I'm happy to volunteer or look to other board members to volunteer on that kickoff. Okay. All right. Any last thoughts on this? All right. Thanks.
Exciting.
Yeah, we look forward to more.
Thank you all.
Okay,
Thanks
thank
for being
you.
in the weeds with me, and I'll continue as I know more information. We'll get on the agendas for updates. So thank you all for the valuable feedback today. This is helpful.
Thanks, Kara.
A lot.
Great to see you, Kara.
Okay. Moving on to normal biz for future agendas. Mr. Peacock, any
Yeah,
updates,
and I
changes?
will try and I will cede my time to Patty on future agendas.
Well, John, you better be quick, because I only have one.
Okay.
It appears that we have a tentative joint meeting scheduled with Gunnison County, which I'm really happy to see. Do we know any of the logistics? Are we
Not yet.
braving 133? Are we braving marble? Are we?
We're doing it virtually.
Yeah.
We're all
we
hiking
don't know.
over.
Excuse me? It's too muddy
We're
up
doing
there.
it virtually? I want to go over there.
Yeah.
It's been fun going on. We've had some wild experiences going over there.
Yeah, I think
Have they agreed to? Oh, sorry. I was going to say, have they agreed yet to just give us anything that's in our watershed?
I think they would love to, but I'm not sure we're willing to accept it. So we'll find out more, John.
Yeah.
That was my only question.
Wow.
I didn't give you enough time to get up to speed over there.
And I hope all of you saw the letter that I sent based on direction and input from the board to the Gunnison BOCC on wild and scenic, and then also the Yule Creek. So I've heard back from Roland Mason. They're very eager to talk with us. So we'll talk on the phone or we'll talk at a joint meeting, which should be great. Any other items for future agendas? I'm gonna pull up my notes here. I do want to have a little check-in. I think, so we still have this running list of stuff that we wanted to do, including a meeting with the division engineer. I'm not sure if John Ely's been able to reach out on that. Also, we had discussion related to a potential agriculture advisory board. And I think the way we left that is we needed to have I think we pushed it to staff to have some discussion about where that board might live, if we were to appoint it. And so I just want to keep that on the horizon as well. Anything else? All right, folks, I will not be here next week. I will try to call in for Wednesday's meeting on some pertinent topics.
So guys, I will be running the show, so hopefully you'll bear with me with the techno glitches. If they're not mine, I can blame them on you.
All right.
Right, Skylar?
Okay, any other future agenda stuff? Okay, seeing and hearing none, we can go on. Oh, Steve, go ahead.
So I will be back next week in person, but then I noticed that Greg's at home, Francie's at home, only Patty, two of you are there in person. Kelly, you're wearing your mask. I'm wondering what the scene is there. I've been in Anchorage, which is like being slammed hugely by the Delta variant. Only 44% of the people there are vaccinated, so we've been wearing our masks a lot the last few days. But when I arrived back there, what is the expectation of how many of us can be in the room at one time? Do we need to be masked if we come into the meeting room? Are we all going to try to start meeting in person again? Those kind of questions I'm curious about.
Steve, I'll let John Peacock talk to the, admin building rules, but I've been addressing it as chair that it continues to be people's prerogative on masks. I just simply elect to wear mine. I have little people whose risk I continue to bear. And, last week at the EOTC meeting, we had a pretty full room that was, I would say, mostly unmasked. And then the day before that, we had a hearing, we had a work session where there was kind of a mixed bag. So it's your prerogative as to what you feel comfortable with. I've not indicated any expectations beyond those of the county as a whole, and I'll let John talk to those.
Yeah, Steve, overall, we have not changed our profile since you left in terms of gathering and masking requirements in the building. Incidence rates are going up in Pickens County, and we're monitoring the data around serious illness, particularly hospitalizations. There is going to be a Board of Health meeting this week. Is it this week or next week?
I thought it was the 12th.
I'm sorry, next week. I was
12th.
a week ahead.
Don't make me like, whoa.
Yeah, I'm hoping Jordana wasn't listening to that. But at the upcoming Board of Health meeting, the CDC guidance will be discussed, along with how the Board of Health wants to approach that. I think it'll be particular to schools. And so in our buildings right now, we are continuing to keep our densities low, operate in a hybrid fashion, and masks have been optional.
Francie.
Hey, Steve, I have been attending in person, but the canyon has been closed a lot. And so one of the routes is over Independence, and so the traffic has been really bad. So that's why I'm not going, because it adds like 3 hours to my day of just sitting in the car. It takes me as long to go from the airport to town, Steve, as it takes me to go from my house to the airport. So it's really accelerated in the last few weeks, especially with the canyon being closed. So that's why I'm home.
But Steve rides the bus, which will expedite
It still
his
takes a while.
journey.
Yeah, that's why, I started riding the bus 8 years ago. Once I got stuck in traffic a couple of times, I figured if I'm going to a meeting, I want to be there, get there on time, and the bus was the only way I could possibly guarantee I'd be there close to on time. Once in a while, the bus, even with the bus, you're late once in a while.
Yeah.
Unless you're on a half an hour earlier bus is the only way.
Especially now, even the buses have trouble right now.
Well, it would be great to see you, Steve, at least once.
Yeah.
You go, I'll go.
No, I'm planning on going in person. I'll see I'll just play it by ear. I'll go in person, I'll bring my mask, and I'll just play it by ear when I get there.
All right. And safe travels home, Steve. Open discussion items.
Yeah, so two discussion items. I believe we have Brian Pettit on. We have a an emergency funding issue with Redstone GID, I believe. Brian, do you want to pick that up and kind of talk about the flooding and such?
Yes, I will. Good evening or good afternoon. This is Brian Pettit, Public Works Director. And as you know, we have a ballot question going on for Redstone Ranch Acres that will be at your second reading on August 11th. It was approved on first reading just last week. And as you know from that discussion, Redstone Ranch Acres is in debt already to the county based on some overspending that was necessary for snow removal in the 2021 winter season. Recently, we had a bunch of rain up the Crystal River, and it took its toll on Redstone Ranch Acres roads to the degree that we have pretty severe rutting on a lot of the roads, and water has been diverted out of their area of drainage, which I wouldn't call a ditch, into the road, and is causing additional erosion on those roads now. Secondly, those require repair and immediate repair. Secondly, they do not have any money to provide snow removal in November and December of this year. So we would be asking for somewhat of a loan to them anyway. So that's kind of the urgency behind this. This will come to the board in the form of a supplemental next month, but given the state of the roads there, we would like to go ahead and approve $20,000 to get the roads in good shape now. And also that would provide hopefully enough funding to get them through the winter season of 2021. And then hopefully they'll pass the ballot question and those funds could be paid back to the county over time. So that's the question to the board today, is to provide a $20,000 kind of bridge loan to Redstone Ranch Acres. We would give it to Ann Driggers and Connie Baker to orchestrate how that would need to be done from an accounting standpoint.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Patty?
Yeah, having driven up through Redstone on Sunday, it's a mess. And Mother Nature is definitely taking her toll. And this Redstone Acres, they were ripe for this hit with the water and the mud. So yeah, I think we need to do what we need to do up there, because it's just going to get worse and be more expensive. And as long as we work out a payment plan for a loan, I myself am comfortable in considering that as a supplemental request.
Okay, thanks. Francie?
I still have a problem with this, Brian. The same problem that I had the first time we talked about it, which is 2 times ago. I mean, if it's $20,000 and there's 50 residents, that's $400 per family. Why can't they just put in their $400 and fix their roads like everybody else does? Since the county did not take on maintenance of the roads as a responsibility, it's incumbent on them, it seems to me, just like all of us who live on these roads. I really don't get it.
Yes, and that's a path. That community has, over time, just not been able to get their self-organized. And so there's been a few active people that have been willing to help, but I think that's the struggle with that community right now. And certainly that's a path, Francie, is to not help them financially right now and have them organized. But that's not been what we've had historically.
Yeah. Well, I don't mean to sound like we don't care about them. I do care a lot about everybody up there, and I drove those roads Sunday night. I know exactly what it looks like right now and how bad it is, but I just feel like they chose to live in a very remote, hard to access place that isn't right near all the bulldozers and stuff that the county houses. And so $400 per family seems pretty minimal to get their road up and running and ready for the winter.
Kelly,
Okay, thanks, Francie. Patty?
yeah, but I don't think they have an organized HOA. They don't have any process in which to tax everybody for $400 or loan the money or anything. They don't have that infrastructure. And Brian, didn't you say that some of this mud flow and issues are actually impacting 133? Or is it just their internal?
I don't know that, it's internal, it's internal.
Okay, but I don't want it to
That's the
get to a
big
point
problem.
where it does, because then it's a bigger issue. So I can see right where Francie's coming from, but they don't have the infrastructure in there. They don't, if they had an HOA, they could tag it on as part of their monthly assessment and spread it out. But in the meantime, they're still gonna need a loan to get this done. And we just to make sure, we need to make sure there's a method in which they can pay the county back, rather than just let this get worse and become more of an issue and a public safety issue for that neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Other thoughts from board members? Steve?
If we do this for Redstone Ranch Acres, I could foresee that there might be other subdivisions that have almost an emergency need or something, like they get overwhelmed, they would need some help. Do we have a standard, or should we create a standardized process if someone is in need of emergency? I would consider this akin to an emergency situation, that they could borrow from the county with a set process for how that money then is paid back. Seems like it would be good to have a policy to, just set up the methodology for that at this point, for any future situation from perhaps another subdivision, or maybe the whole upper end of the Crystal River for that matter, because there's so many mudslides this year again in particular.
Yeah, and I will say, G.R. Fielding, county engineer, brought that point up earlier, and we kind of talked about it at staff level. And what makes this Redstone Ranch Acres a little different is the Board of County Commissioners is the board's GID, whereas other homeowners associations don't have that kind of bureaucratic oversight. So you are frankly in control of Redstone Ranch Acres finances by virtue of being their board. What I'm saying is it puts them in a little different light than just another homeowners association in the county. But I like the idea of having a process by which an HOA or a GID go through and for an emergency accommodation.
What's GID? Sorry.
It's General Improvement District.
Thank you.
To clarify, Redstone Ranch Acres it's a little different. It's a road general improvement district, so it's very specific.
So we're like kids to them.
We're like, what?
Yeah, I'm way too long to get that. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
my goodness. Okay.
Is John, can I?
I want John Peacock to weigh in. He's leaning in with that.
No, that's okay. And this probably isn't adding a whole lot, but Greg, a general improvement district is what's known as a dependent special district. And so Brian is absolutely right. The form that this takes is more of an interfund transfer that this board gets to approve both sides of, versus being in a lending agreement, which actually there are some prohibitions against counties being in that position with a private organization like an HOA. And so the fact that a dependent special district was created on behalf of this community does put it in a slightly different profile in terms of our ability to be able to do this and be able to secure the funds back. Otherwise, we'd probably be in the profile of helping out just on an emergency basis.
Could I ask a follow-up just
Sure.
on regarding that? As Steve pointed out, there may be others. How many other general improvement districts are there? And could a group of orphaned homeowners in Brush Creek, for instance, apply for GID status? Is that like could we come in and
there is a
beg
process. There are a number of potential funding mechanisms for communities that have common interests for either infrastructure or services, Greg, including things like the general improvement districts. There are also public improvement districts. There are lots of mechanisms available. They do all require a petition process and a vote at the general election.
Got it. Okay. It's just interesting to know about this. And then do we have means to assess them individually in those micro districts? Can we assess them, recompense for money we put in?
No, you can't necessarily assess the property owners. That is a tax that has to be approved at a vote, but you can appropriate funds as the board of the district when those revenues are available. Does that make sense?
Got it. Kinda. Yep. Thank
So
you.
we can pay
Well,
ourselves,
I'm
pay
just
the county
thinking
general
my
fund back
neighbors and I may be
before
applying.
anything else.
There's
Yeah.
a method in which you can do that.
Okay, Francie.
So we can give the money, but we can't get money from them, is what you're saying, Todd.
No.
No, you can't. So you can appropriate funds so long as they're available. What you can't do is a special, I think what Greg was asking was, can we do a special assessment or a tax on the folks in the district for that purpose? And under the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, you cannot do that without a vote. Does that
You're
make
hearing
sense?
the thunder right now in the Crystal River Valley. It's just about to pour
Is
again.
that right? Yeah.
I'm wondering if we can use this, Brian, instead of, it sounds so mean. Instead of just giving them the money and making up some way, I don't know what, but maybe we could help them get organized. And that's our contribution rather than the money. Like maybe we could put together some kind of mailing system for them that says, this is the amount of work that you need done, and you guys need to contribute to a general fund that you guys create, and we can just do that for them, make them get organized as a way to help them move forward rather than just fixing it for them again. Is there any mechanism for that kind of thing?
Sure. I mean, we have all the contacts, and we have emailed that group before. Just to put it in kind of context, out of the 46 homeowners to schedule a meeting with that group and talk about taxing themselves, only 20 showed up. So that's the struggle. And so, yeah, we can do that, and we can kick it back to them and communicate it all day long. There's not a lot of involvement there.
Mm-hmm.
And Francie, I think we have some.
Do they all live there year round? Is it they're year-round residents? No.
No, not at all.
I see.
Many snowbirds come and go.
I see.
And I think we have kind of a coincidence, a little bit of timing here, where we've identified increasing the mill levy and putting that on the ballot as really the ultimate solution for the homeowners to pay their way on their roads. But the rain has beat November, beat the opportunity to vote on that ballot question.
Okay, I want to move us on. Patty?
Yeah, real quick. I think that it's an emergency issue, so trying to organize them rather than give them the money does nothing to help them in this emergency, because it would take a year or 2 years to get them to do any kind of different kind of special district, or to create a homeowners association, elect people, blah, blah, blah. So I think right now, in this dire situation that we're finding ourselves in up there, we need to do this for them with a method of paying back out of their increased mill levy. So hopefully, out of their mill levy, hopefully they will vote then to increase it, or they need to know this is not a threat to them, but they will still need to pay us, if it doesn't pass, pay the county back out of their 9,000, 10,000 they do collect a year, which means they may not have adequate snow plowing for next year's out, because they don't have the money, because we help them out in this emergency situation. So
Isn't that a form of lending? And you said there's no lending
No, we're not
capacity,
lending
John?
them. We're not lending them money. The counties cannot set themselves up as a bank. That
Right.
is illegal for counties to
So-
be in the loan business.
Well, how is that different?
Because we are them.
Because we are the officers, we are the board for their general improvement district. So it's a very, very different situation than us just going out and opening us up like a bank and giving money out as a lender. We cannot do that. We're not authorized to do that. Which makes this special, as is many issues in Redstone and the Crystal River Valley are special. We can accommodate them in this situation.
Okay, so I support it with clear communication that this is a loan. I'm not sure if you've had 3. Do we have 3 support direction from a majority of the board? I heard Patty and me. Steve?
So I would support this. We, as the board of directors, we have a responsibility, and it's imperative that we do all the communication and try to get the mill levy to pass in November. I don't know what happens if that doesn't pass. That would put us in a bind, but I guess we cross that bridge when we get to it. So maybe we take our bridge out and they can walk to their houses. I don't know what the solution is. So anyhow, right now, I think we need to help them fix the roads. The county road and bridge crew are probably the best ones for fixing roads that there are anywhere around here. They are really professional at it, and if we send in a county crew to do work there, I think it would be, they would do an excellent job.
Okay. Brian, I think you have direction, I hope. Any last clarifications that you would like or need?
No, there'll be a $20,000 supplemental coming next month that will certify this, and then we'll proceed accordingly now.
Great.
To get that done. Okay.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Second open discussion item, John.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure the board saw that the joint agenda now has 4 interviews on it for APSHA candidates, and because of there being so many topics, we opted for a roundtable where board members could bring topics forward. Not sure if you want to spend a few minutes maybe collectively deciding on a couple topics rather than a shotgun approach, because of course if there's a dozen things thrown out, you're not going to get to talk about them very much. So I just wanted to make sure the board saw that change and that we took a few minutes to prepare for that meeting if necessary.
Can I just add something about the interviews?
Sure. Patty, then Greg.
Just
Did
real
Charlotte
quick,
send that out?
just doing a little research,
Yeah, I came today.
with talking to the county attorney, as far as a county employee applying for this APSHA position, there's nothing that we can find in the Home Rule Charter or the
That would
bylaws.
prohibit it.
So I think it would just be up to the applicant if they would feel comfortable being interviewed, comfortable if they were to be appointed. Because it could be an issue, people perceiving it as a county employee, therefore it's another county vote, et cetera, even though I don't feel that way. So I think we should just offer it up to the applicant, the information, and let them make their choice. But I wanted to bring it to this board to see what this board thinks about it, if we should bring it up at the APSHA meeting, or at the part of the interview process this afternoon.
Okay.
So any comments from anybody?
I like that idea, Patty. Thank you for looking into it.
And the interview process, the interviews are still open, the application process, it's still open until Friday the 6th. So we will not be able to make a decision today because we may have more applicants coming in.
Yeah, we don't anticipate that both bodies will have independent discussions.
I just want to make sure that people knew that their applications can still be accepted. Anybody out there? Thanks, Kelly.
Sure. Okay. And folks, Tori is chairing the meeting. I have chaired the last 2 joint meetings, even though it will be in our room, just so you know. So he will handle the roundtable effort.
Kelly, you brought up a good point about if we were to discuss the lumberyard. Do you have any more information on that?
Yeah, so I know there was some interest in the AABC and the lumberyard project, and I just wanted to make sure we weren't stepping out of bounds, so I checked with John Ely about whether there would be any 1041 review for the county on that project, and he said there would not be, because it is fully annexed into the city, and so it doesn't implicate any county review.
Even though that we don't have to go through site and location?
Not if it's their land.
Oh,
Yeah, so
it's
the,
only if, like, Cozy Point was in our jurisdiction, but their land.
yeah, it would go through a city process unless there's any development that would occur outside. I think the annexation stops at that parcel's boundary, so, you know,
It does.
development maybe around transportation and
We will
such,
still be
but-
allowed to submit comments, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Kelly.
Sure. All right, any other items for open discussion?
Did the board have any particular items they wanted to bring up at roundtable?
So I have to say, I brought to Tori all the items that we had discussed in our prep meeting, which had included, traffic, entrance to Aspen, short-term rentals, AABC and lumberyard, childcare, housing, the homeless encampment, and, we had narrowed those a little bit, not a ton, so I'm not gonna definitively say what's on or off the table, but it sounded like, for example, climate action, we thought would be better for a future meeting after we've more specified our climate plan. And same with the homeless encampment, when we have more of a proposal about what the future looks like to discuss that. But I think, Tori had said to me that they have energy around the AABC and traffic and entrance to Aspen, less so maybe around housing and childcare and short-term rentals. So if we, as a board, want to make time for that, we should be clear about that at the start of the meeting. Patty?
Did we want to do a brief heads up on the airport advisory?
Yeah,
Yes.
so Rich and I were just, yeah.
Oh, I beat
Yep.
you to it. I got it. I got
And
it.
that was on
I'm
there.
supposed to bunt, right?
We can give a
So
quick
all of
update.
those-
I don't think it's
I think we
All of those topics in addition to the interviews?
Yes, so the hope is the interviews take an hour, and then, not all of those topics,
we're-
those
we're
were just
trying-
the universe of topics.
Right, we're trying to pinpoint which
Okay.
topics we
So-
think are of greatest importance. I think the airport would be wise. I don't know if anybody else has been hearing it, but we've been getting emails. I got stopped twice just walking from here to the bank about people who are concerned about the roundabout construction. It's really between the city and CDOT. And I don't know who we should be directing the comments we get, the letters we get, who we should be sending those to. People want to delay it. It's gonna have to be done, so I don't know if that is something we wanted to touch base on, because it's building. After the EOTC meeting, people are paying attention.
It's really a CDOT project at the end of the day. The EOTC's involvement and our involvement has been around the scope, to expand the scope for some capacity enhancements and making it concrete versus asphalt, hopefully for better durability.
So who
in the
should
winter.
we should be sending our comments to whom? I mean, we're getting letters, we're getting emails.
CDOT. It's their project.
So I send them to Brian and have him forward them on?
Either, I'm sorry. Sorry,
Yeah.
I was answering institutionally, not individually.
I got the CDOT part, but it's a pretty big organization.
Tracy Truelove has been the PIO for CDOT on the project.
Okay.
Is she the PIO for CDOT now again? Tracy
Correct.
is? Okay, I thought she was.
Well, maybe she's just doing it for Glenwood. I'm sorry. It's
Well, just let
Yeah.
us know, because we're, maybe we won't get more, but maybe we will, and I'd just like to make sure that people's concerns are sent to the right place. So if you could just let us know.
okay.
We don't have to bring it up today. Now that you said that, we can save it
So
for,
Kelly, just to take one little step backward, I certainly have been in favor of having the conversation about the implications of the lumberyard project and what it means in, the west of Aspen Western Maroon plan. I don't get a sense that there's been a lot of communication or cooperation between county and city over the years on that. And I just think, why don't we reinitiate that now before things go a lot farther than wait for a comment later after a plan has been solidified? And I could be naive in thinking we'll accomplish something, but I think a lot of people have questions about, gee, how is this going to work? How is this going to work by putting another 400 homes or whatever it is there? And how is this going to affect everything else and be part of everything else that's happening out there on a very busy highway with a lot of other activities? So I'm having trouble understanding why we're not having a conversation, but I'm also having trouble understanding just how that would proceed. And so maybe John would have a comment on how we could be productive. But the impression I get is staff a couple of years ago, we heard from both John and from Sarah Ott that staff got shut down in conversations about how, working together out there. And I thought, wow, if that was a perspective from both sides, then there's a disconnect that might necessarily be revisited by the elected officials.
So, Greg, if this assuages your concern at all, Tori and I talked about the interest in the lumberyard and the AABC, and he said the council has interest in it, so I expect it's going to be one of our topics this afternoon. Do you want to table those questions until then, or is it helpful to have some of that input before?
Yeah, I don't expect an answer now unless John wants to share anything with us, or if there's some other strategy somebody wants to share. But that's kind of what I was thinking about this meeting. It's like, okay, how do we start working together again in a productive way? So it's not just always a locations and extent question when somebody wants to do something.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to have the discussion today, it's probably about clarifying what the scope of a future conversation would likely include. Because, Greg, I think what I heard you say is maybe stepping back into the master planning process, which would be revisiting potentially a lot in terms of what's happening with coordinated development and such there. Or is the conversation really maybe not quite at that 50,000 foot level, but is it more at a 10,000 foot level where the coordination is really around, we understand, we have these plans for development, and we understand there are going to be some impacts, say around transportation or such, that we need to coordinate working on. And so I think you could have a productive discussion first by understanding what are you really talking about when you say to revisit these things, because I think maybe the scope that you're talking about and what I hear from some of the community members is bigger than maybe what some of the other elected officials might be thinking about. And if you can identify that scope, then I think staff has some marching orders as far as how we work together. I think where we've gotten hung up is what is the conversation we're intending to have here. We came in at a master planning level, and I think the city was coming in more on how do we make these things work together that are already planned. Those are two different discussions. And so when we say shut down, I don't think anyone was shutting each other down. We just didn't have the same kind of vision or marching orders of what the conversation was and what we were trying to coordinate on. Does that make sense?
Right.
And so that could be
that makes
productive
great
today.
sense. I appreciate the description of it, and I certainly would be open to both, quite honestly. You make plans. You go through a master planning process. You create a plan at ComDev called the Western Maroon Master Plan, and then that gets shelved as projects are pushed forward. And I don't think that that's really the best way to plan something as critical as this. But I don't know if I'm alone in that sentiment. So that's where I am. kind of thinking, wait a minute, didn't we have some plans in place, and aren't they being ignored, and why?
John,
Patty had a comment.
yeah, just real quick, because I know we need to take a break. The concern for me is they're moving along with the lumberyard. And to go back and revisit a master plan is timely. I mean, it's time consuming. So I don't know how we can mesh, they're moving forward, and we want to revisit the master plan and how that's going to connect.
And that's why I think you need to just spend a little bit of time understanding what do they mean when they say what does the city mean when they mean revisiting it? It may be more about some specific areas that can be mitigated versus what you're talking about.
Just opening it
Those
up.
need to be resolved if staff is going to be able to move forward. And
Yeah.
I think what happened was we were coming at it from two different perspectives.
Well, I'm not sure the city understands if they think we're going to reopen it and that it's time, it takes time, and they want to move forward. So it's up to them. If they say we'll slow down our process in order to do X, then that may be a
Or we agree that it's a mitigation conversation because they're
Exactly.
moving forward with affordable housing. So that is really something that needs to be worked out amongst the boards.
Great. Well, I appreciate the conversation beginning here because it helps me understand it better. Thank you.
So it'll be interesting. That we have an hour
Okay.
to do all that, right?
Yep. All right, so we're going to take a 15-minute break before we reconvene with our joint meeting with the city. And before we do so, I want to extend the heartiest happy birthdays to John Peacock, who we
Well, it's
won't
coming up.
see before his birthday next Monday. So happiest turner on the
Happy
sun.
birth
you.
week.
Yeah, and Larry Fite's birthday is Thursday.
All right. All right, folks, we'll see you at 4 o'clock. All right, and thanks, Grass,
Are we staying on this?
for the
on
pod.
this?
Stay here?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, it's
Jay, are we live? We're live? Okay.
Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us, everybody. This is a joint meeting between the Aspen City Council and the Board of County Commissioners, August 3rd, 2021. Tonight on our agenda, we have really just two items. The first item is board interviews for APSHA. This is a joint position. And Kelly's going to give a little bit of information about that before we get into it. And then after that, we're just going to be able to have a little roundtable discussion and just talk about some items. Also, in that roundtable discussion, we will be queuing up items for our next joint meeting so that we can put those on some kind of work list as we move forward. So we have four applicants. I think the order that we have them in right now is Allison, David, Rebecca, and then Damien. And so we'll get started in 1 second, but Kelly wants to give a little bit of background on the position that we're interviewing for.
Sure, thank you. So this is an appointment that is jointly made by both the BOCC and the city in concurrence. And as folks may remember, after we updated the IGA, we have 3 community members that we appoint to serve as well as an alternate, and those were appointed in staggered terms. And so Rick Head was appointed to a 2-year term, which is concluding upon the next appointment that we make to serve. And then the next community member term will be in next year, next August 2022, and then following in 2023, reflecting 2, 3, and 4 staggered terms. This application is still open until Friday, so we will interview these candidates, and then as of earlier today, there were no additional candidates at this time, but we will leave that open. And I think we had one pending for us that was not scheduled for today, so we'll figure out a time to do those joint appointments and then make a decision about that. Any other questions I can answer about the process at this time? This is for the Aspen-Pitkin Housing Authority. Okay.
Thanks, Kelly. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Like I said, Allison is up first. She's not in the room. She's joining us on Zoom. So, Allison, can you unmute and see if we got audio from you?
Hi there.
All right, that's working. Allison, thank you so much for applying and taking part in these interviews. My first question for you is just about the roles, responsibilities, and the meeting schedule that APSHA has. Are you aware of the meeting schedule? Do you have any conflicts there? And are you aware of the roles and responsibilities?
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time, and I'm heartbroken that I'm not there in the room with all of you now that you are in person. I think I've left Aspen twice in the last 14 months, and tonight is one of those nights, so I'm sorry I'm not there, but it's nice to see the faces and be part of this. Yeah, I'm aware. I had a job where I was required to be at those meetings every other week, and all of the extra ones for the last couple of years. So the time commitment is something that I'm aware of as far as attending the meetings, reading the packet, which I, of course, would do before attending those meetings, and then researching and asking staff questions. That's all stuff I feel really comfortable with, as I've already done it. In my previous role as a reporter, what's really exciting about my new life and my new schedule is that work does end at 5 o'clock. I'm able to come attend meetings. I have more evening free time, and I think free time to volunteer and give back to the community in a way I haven't before, and nothing is more important to me than housing. So this is where I would be honored to volunteer.
Thank you, Allison, and you also answered my next question. So that's all for me. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to commissioners and council members, and I'm trying to balance my Zoom here, so Kelly might be helping me a little bit as keeping an eye on some stuff, but let's go ahead and start. Does anybody have a question or
Sure.
for Allison? Rachel?
Yeah, thank you, Allison. I hope you can hear me. We're getting into this. I'm just wondering, what are the skills or talents that you particularly hope to bring to the board, or that you might see the board needs more of?
Certainly. Well, I think the thing that I'm best at and have proven over the last decade is asking questions. So I think there's a lot of policies and different aspects of the program that are being questioned right now. The staff is doing a really good job of bringing some updates and amendments, and I think just making sure that the full conversation has been had before before things get voted on or brought attention to the larger community. So just a lot of curiosity. I think the makeup of the citizen representation on the board is important, and so I don't know if you would call it like a skill, but I think the fact that I lived in 4 different temporary housing situations my first year, to come here and then have lived in Free Market, have lived in APSHA rentals, have purchased an APSHA, have won and purchased an APSHA. The fact that I know the program inside out, I know the context of why we're under the current IGA. I think that is a lot of background information that helps me hit the ground running and helps me come to it with an understanding of the purpose of this board, and not just we want housing. Of course, we all want housing, but why this board exists, what this board has the ability to do, and the purview that this board does not have. I think all of that understanding is also a really strong, I don't know if skill is the right thing, but I'm coming to the table with all of that as well.
Great. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry, I seem to be losing my virtual here, back and forth.
I don't see you, but it's great to hear you.
Okay.
There you are.
Thanks, Rachel. Commissioners? Kelly?
Hi, Allison. Nice to see you. Would love to have seen you here too, but we'll catch up soon. I'm wondering, I know you've started a new job. Congratulations with ACRA, and ACRA often has opinions on housing and interest in housing. Do you see any potential conflict with your role at work versus your role as a community member on this board? And how might you balance those?
I would want to come to this board just as Allison Bekdesh, Aspen citizen who believes in this very strongly. I think the fact that in the new role, I talk to our local business owners and their staff daily is really good perspective, right? This is a representative board. And so coming to it with the perspective that I have as a young professional who, I came to Aspen for the job. You hear the story all the time where I came for the winter, stayed for the summers, or I didn't mean to stay here. None of that is true for me. The perspective that I came to Aspen to be a contributing member of the workforce, and I came and fell in love and I'm not going anywhere. But on top of that, I now also have the perspective of other aspects of our workforce and our business owners who I think all really believe the same thing, as far as the mission of APSHA and the board to support sustainable workforce housing, and doing so supports the rest of our community. I think that it's nice that I have that too. ACRA doesn't advocate, we really convene. And so I don't think I would have a conflict of interest where my business would be asking me to say one thing in the public and then I'd come to the board and have to vote against that. But in the end, I'm not being paid by my company to come sit at this board, and I think I would have to vote as that representative citizen and through my experiences and the mission and the strategic goals of this board. Like, that's what we're working towards, and this is not something that I would worry about what my boss would say when I come to the table.
Great, thank you.
Francie.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see everyone. Hi, Allison.
Hi, Francie.
I just want you to know I came on this board a few months ago as an alternate. Just want you to be aware that it's a very time-consuming and emotionally consuming board. Just a little caveat for you. You know, we meet more often than most of the citizen volunteer boards, and there are some pretty serious problems that need to be dealt with, and we also are targets for the public quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering how you might deal with that.
That's excellent, and I was expecting some form of the, you know, what would the hardest part of this job be question, and I think you just did a really good job of wrapping it all up in my brain, is that housing is so incredibly personal, that it's so important. It's the root of everything else you can be in this community, right? So I've watched the transition of the authority getting a compliance officer, of the decision to go to some hearings, so that it's not those citizens who are telling other neighbors and friends, hey, you broke the rules, you're out. You know, those discussions, which I've sat through, are heart-wrenching. So I'm glad that some of those items have been addressed, but you still hear it, right? Even when there's nothing the board can do, someone will come and speak at public comments. There'll be these complications where it's their own personal house. And so every personal story, there's a reason why things happen this way, or they feel caught up or feel targeted for this reason or that reason. And I think that is emotionally draining. And there's always going to be individual stories when you make policy changes about who, I know some of the things that you have coming up, or the age of your dependent, something like that. It's going to be super logical until you hear that one story where, but we need it to be this way, and this is what our family does. And I think the broader view and keeping in mind the mission of this program for the community is what it's going to come down to. But my heart is a big sucker, and so I think those are complicated questions. I would be so proud to be part of that discussion.
And the other part is that you also will be a target. The board itself is a target of a lot of harsh letters and press and comments and stuff. So you think you've got the thick skin?
I don't know if you read the comments on our local newspaper articles. I've heard it, and I think, you know, serving for the good of the community and just the always voting with my values, I think that's, you kind of have to let it go after that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Francie. Rachel?
Thank you, Allison. I really appreciate your answers there. And just two things. You had mentioned the mission of APSHA, so I'd like you to describe what you think the mission of the housing program in APSHA is. And then secondly, just an example of the very difficult things Francie was talking about. We had a discussion at our last meeting about the retirement age for people who've been in APSHA units for a long period of time. And while nothing's set in stone, we seem to have settled on the idea that if you have 35 years of work history in town and the 15 years prior to your requesting retirement were consecutive, that you could retire early at Social Security retirement age, which I believe is 64, as opposed to the past policy has always been full Social Security retirement age no matter what. So kind of, again, as you are thinking about these things, how do you judge an issue like that, and how do you believe that relates to the mission of APSHA?
Sure. Well, I'm lucky that you guys did the work as was outlined in the IGA to create a mission and a vision for your 5-year strategic plan and then your 1-year work plan. So I don't have to guess what the mission is. It's written down, and the heart of it is just supporting workforce housing and how that relates to our sustainable community. And that is what I believe the mission should be and is. A couple years ago now, I was covering an ACRA winter school meeting or winter school luncheon, and that's kind of like our biggest, locals get together and get some community time in. And I remember there's 3 videos. There's a video bragging about the winter school queen, the king, and then there's always that kind of legacy award. Obviously they hadn't consulted each other. Each of those people in their little bio videos spoke about winning housing and how that completely changed their life. They got to stay in their community they love. And these are people who went on to become such big contributing members of our community that we're giving them lifetime achievement awards. And, they have done the work that creates community in all the different ways. And so I just believe in that so strongly, that the mission of keeping the community together, allowing community to be created. There's goals of both of your boards that are intertwined with housing. I think housing is the biggest circle. You can talk about mental health, but you better secure housing. You can talk about the environment, but that is so tied to where you're starting and where you're getting to, right? You can talk about the economy and our workforce and staffing issues. All those have little circles that intertwine, and then housing, I just think it's attached to every single one of the other issues that makes Aspen specific and makes any community strong. So that's what I believe the mission is, and that's what I would work toward. For questions like the retirement age, and if you'll allow me to circumnavigate what I actually would vote on that right now, because it isn't decided yet, that's where I think the questions really come into play. So I think I would want more staff time. How much was this being violated, and what were we losing when it was being, if we, what would we lose? What would we gain? How many people would this affect, and what are you hearing from those people? What are you hearing from the people who aren't able to retire early because we have this stringent, are we giving extra bonuses somehow because you don't get to have that? I mean, that's such a specific group of people who have the absolute pleasure of having lived here for that long, right? You found Aspen and found a way to stay for that long. And of course, I do think that we should never kick anyone out after serving for that long in our community in the ways that they have. So I think there's questions as to the motivation and cost benefit analysis to any policy, and making sure that you don't have any unintended consequences to this. Would you be able to skirt this new rule this way? Will we start seeing a bunch of people, taking on this or that? So I think that is where the kind of broader, nosy question asking thing that I'm already good at comes into play.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you.
Steve?
Thank you. And I'm going to keep my screen off. I'm not heartbroken that I'm not there with you in person because I'm in Fairbanks, Alaska right now.
Oh my goodness.
A little bit of a delay, and just to have better audio, I'll keep my screen off. Thank you so much for applying for this position, Allison. There are a couple of big pressing issues on affordable housing in the valley. One is just the lack of enough affordable housing, with reports being, 2,500 unit shortage of affordable housing up to about, I heard, 4,500, depending on level of affordability. The other issue of the valley's facing is the lack of housing projects having enough or any capital reserve for doing long-term improvements on it. Some of them have good capital reserves, others not. Do you have any thoughts on either one of those issues, and maybe innovative solutions that someone else hasn't come up with at this point? Thank you.
Have I secretly solved our area housing program and not revealed it till this moment? I'm so glad we've done some of those long-term studies with the population expectations, and we have the ability to plan for what might we need. It is in the 5-year plan to do a lot more regional solutions, and I think that does make sense because as much as I can't understand it. Not everybody wants to live in the downtown heart of Aspen, my favorite town in the whole world. So there's, I don't think there's any assumptions to be made as to where someone would want to live. And I think that regional partnership is a good idea. However, then you do bring in issues of the environment, issues of traffic, issues of mental health and waiting in traffic, right? So I like some of the stuff that has been floated about better using the beds we have, about not building, but obtaining beds in other ways, and then some of those regional solutions. Of course, you know, I hesitant to talk about my personal, what I would do if I had the wand, because it is a board, and there's, you know, the whole voting membership has to create some of these policies and decide together. And I think that what I would offer is just as my perspective on, you know, from my point in life, which is that younger workforce specific. And I'm glad that there would be a variety of people who are in APSHA and not, and in different phases of life and different phases of needing childcare through senior care, through all of that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I have thought about these things. I forget what your second issue was. It's coming up. Oh, capital reserve. So another thing, I think I am in that demographic of people who feel so lucky and will do anything to make their house feel like a home. So I know that, especially early on in the program, it didn't sound fun to put away money for new roofs and those kind of things. I'm in the wave of owners who no one put away the money for the roof, but a roof is needed. And I just think you need someone on the board who's going to speak up for, of course I'm going to want a roof over my head. Of course I don't want my counter to be peeling. And so whether or not it's fair that I'm taking on costs that other people didn't put in for, those kind of things, I think just always keeping in mind that the people living, for the most part, the people living in APSHA housing are very normal human beings who want their home to feel like home. They're not passing through. Winning a house is just, it's better than winning the lottery. It's just the biggest gift. And I think for the most part, people treat it like that. And so just really keeping that perspective that it's not lazy homeowners. It's not people who are being stingy, and making sure that we can all work together to make sure, to see how some of those funding issues can come up. But I just think the perspective really needs to you know, these are people feel very, very lucky, and these are community members. And I think that's just the perspective I would come from that. It is a complicated issue that I've reported on for a long time, and I think there could be different solutions for the different the different land agreements with all the different properties, which is a big lift. Enjoy Alaska.
So Tori.
Sorry, I'm reading a something that just came through on our chat that.
Skylar, we'll let you handle that, I hope.
Thank you. I've got Ward. I've got a hand up from Ward, and then Patty.
Thank you. Steve has the West Coast, I have the East Coast, and you guys are in between. Allison, thank you for applying. I think your answers have demonstrated a really in-depth knowledge of the housing situation of APSHA. I do have a question, and I know you're reluctant to answer with your opinion, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And that is, what do you think is the number one issue facing APSHA, and what is your idea for solving it?
I wonder if I'm biased because I feel like I can help solve it, but I think it's been identified by the current board. It's communication and transparency. I think it's that public trust issue. The policy and the physical building, we can improve and work higher and onward and upward with all of that. I think it's the mistrust or the years of rumors or knowing that the person next to you is maybe getting away with something that you want to get away with. I think there needs to be a much more open feel and a much more honest feel. And I'm not pointing any fingers. I think this is what happens when you piecemeal together a program over 40 years and you're the ones who invented it, right? So there's a lot of catching up to do, but I actually don't think it has anything to do with the very fixable things, very tangible things of, you know, where should something be built or bought, or which policies can be amended. I think that public trust and just really open communication, being really open with those meetings, maybe having a way of getting out what happened in the meetings to the public, you know, just making people feel like it's not a secret mystery. Once you go and sit at one meeting, right, it's not a secret mystery board of overlords, the housing authority, it's your friends and neighbors. And I think just really humanizing that is going to go a long way toward having the public have a lot of faith in the work that this board does.
Spoken like a person that's involved in communications.
So if I were to join.
Yeah, Francine asked this, I'm going to ask it again. Do you have thick skin, and can you turn it off after the meeting? This is more of a mental health.
Yeah, I think about housing. I watch the meetings without being on the board, and I think about housing, and I talk to my friends about housing no matter what. So that's not going to stop. And I think I think I know when and when not to take it personal. And I think, again, at the end of the day, if I'm sticking with my values and I've done my due diligence of speaking with the community and the citizens and voted accordingly, then you can say whatever you want. You know, I think I don't mean to seem ignorant by saying I think I'd be okay, but I've been yelled at daily for a decade, and I think I'll be okay.
Good to know.
I also like when people are nice to me.
Thank you, Allison. I'll yield the floor at this point.
Thanks, Ward.
Yeah, I was just going to thank you, Allison. We have some time constraints, and I know our next applicant is got to go pick up a child or something. So I want to thank you. Your answers were terrific. Your sense of humor is well needed at the end of a long day. So thank you. Thank you again for applying. We appreciate it.
It's my honor. I think I did it 30 minutes after the applications opened. It's good to see you, Patty.
I've got a hand up from Greg. We are kind of running up against time here. So, Greg, do you have a question for Allison?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Allison. I really appreciate it. It's great to see you there, and I'm impressed with your knowledge of it. Having covered it for so long, I'm sure really helps. I'd like to hear your 50,000-foot elevation view looking down on this community. People I talk to often talk about carrying capacity is a word I've heard you've heard. We've heard about sustainability. What is this community going to take? What's it going to take to sustain this community, and what does that mean? What is steady state is the new term. Like, how do we reach a steady state? So are we going to continue growing? You know, my question is, what's your vision for the future of Aspen and the future of employment, housing? What do you think we're going to look like in 20 years? And how will being on the option board? That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here, is to ask this question. But you have to give me a 30-second answer, since that's I'm in the clock now. All right.
More and better.
Up for the challenge.
You had your chance, Greg. You
Well,
ran over.
you know, if everything implodes and everyone moves away because Aspen became an undesirable town, then I'll tell you, housing's going to get affordable real quick. Our problem is solved, and then that would be the quick answer. I feel really excited to be part of ACRA, and that we are doing that citizen survey right now. Everyone should take it before Friday, where we're asking these really big questions. And so I do think that's going to have to be a reverse engineered question, Greg. So where do we want to be? And then we can manage how to get there. And I think that I just can never see Aspen not being desirable. And I think that 20 years from now, it's going to feel you're still going to run into the person you don't want to run into in the grocery store when you're in your pajamas, and you're still going to dress to the nines and go ski down the mountain. And it's all like, I think there's ways of maintaining the true heart of the people who live here year round. And I'm excited. I'm not going anywhere, so I'll be there to see it.
In her pajamas.
Great.
Thanks, Greg.
In my
Hopefully that answers some of the questions that we have. We are on a little bit of a time constraint, so unless anybody has something that's extremely important for Allison, we'd like to move to our next applicant. Allison, thank you so much.
Thanks, Allison.
I really appreciate all the time. I know it takes a while. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our next one, Dave is here in the audience, so perhaps he should come up to a seat.
If he
On the
goes to
corner.
that laptop,
Zoom
then,
in, that would be.
No,
well, really, no,
got
then
it
others
set
can
up.
see
On
him.
that one.
Yes.
All we have to do is click on. We're prepared. High-tech prepared.
Look at him there.
David, thanks for being here today. We know that you've got some other engagement that you need to get to, so we'll try to keep this to about 15 minutes if we can. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Allison. Are you aware of the schedule for APSHA meetings and the roles and responsibilities as a board member?
I am indeed, and thank you first of all for all you guys do, not only on this board but for the greater Aspen public. I am aware of the meeting schedule and of the regulations that go along with it. I believe in preparedness more than anything, more than all else. No, it's a hefty schedule of meetings twice a month, first and third Wednesdays, and but anything that's worth doing is tough, you know, and we have some big questions to answer here, and a rigorous meeting schedule certainly is part of that.
And then I'll ask one other question, and then we'll open it up to other commissioners and council members. You are the publisher of the Aspen Daily News.
That's right.
Also a partner in Channel 82
Yep.
as well. Do you think that there's a conflict, or could there be potentially be conflict with, let's say, a reporter reporting on APSHA business? If you're a board member, do you think that there's any conflict there, and if so, how would you deal with it?
So I see it quite opposite. You know, I think the bedrock to any healthy community is media, is a free press at the beginning to hold power to account, both elected and appointed boards, but also housing is right there, and I consider myself a citizen before I do a newspaper owner. I'm raising 3 children in this community, and I care intensely and deeply about free press and community news. I think it truly is what is the check on power and holds power to account. But again, housing, if not the number one issue besides that, it has to be very close to the top for me. And I have children that I hope have an opportunity to come back here if they so choose. And again, we have seen a deterioration and or almost an exodus of some of our civic leaders by not being able to find housing in our community. And right now, in my best estimation, we're holding space for tourists. And if we don't find a way to namely create opportunities for our civic servants to find a roof over their head in Picken County and, God willing, Aspen, I think that some of the specialness of Aspen will leave with it.
Thanks, David. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to other members. And I want to start.
Tori, I'm going to say one thing about executive session too.
I had to follow up on that.
The one thing I did want to
item.
mention is obvious. You know, I'm here as a citizen. Allison said it very nicely, but I'm here as David Cook, the citizen, not as David Cook, the publisher, or the owner of 82, or the owner of Aspen Daily News. So executive session would remain as that's David Cook and separate from the publisher. So to answer your question very plainly, I don't see a conflict of interest. I think if anything, it helps the transparency and communication in my best estimation. But I would love to hear if you guys foresee any potential conflicts.
I just
wanna
wanted to
follow up on that?
follow up on the
Okay.
executive
Sure.
session. That was the one thing I really had thought about, David, and
Yep.
I appreciate you bringing yourself forward as an applicant for this. But, there are times when we will be talking about evaluations of potential land purchases, whether or not and how to go about prosecution of cases that are difficult. And I worry a little about, you might hear it in a meeting on Wednesday and one of your reporters might hear it somewhere else on a Thursday, and then we all read about it on Friday and wonder who told who what, kind of thing. And so I think that's more the awkwardness that I see about it, as to how, if it's, whether it's land banking or litigation or violations, how do we deal with that mix of what your reporters find out from having a good ear to the ground and lots of contacts versus someone who sat in the room and heard the actual discussion?
Yeah, I would say David Cook, the citizen, is no different than any of the other citizens that are on the board. I spoke to Megan Tackett, my editor-in-chief, prior to this meeting, and she found out that I was applying because of the packet that was posted online. She was very upset by that. But no, I appreciate the question, and I encourage. But every single story, if I do get elected or I do go move forward with the board, every single story would be notated with the fact that with the addendum or an editor's note that I am a part of the APSHA board. But we'd have a very strict code of that's how newsrooms work, and I certainly would not act as a source for my reporters if that's what you're asking.
No, I'm not saying you would, but I'm just saying it might create some awkwardness. I've just been around long enough to have people look at somebody else who's in the executive session like, were you the one who did that 2 weeks ago?
Yeah. I want to be the best candidate for the job, and if you guys foresee that as an issue, then I encourage you to act on that.
Yeah. No, I always ask the tough questions so that people have a chance to respond.
That doesn't feel tough to me at all.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Rachel. Can I go to you, Skippy? Start with some folks that didn't ask questions around.
Yeah, no, you guys all asked every question on my list, so it worked out well. So I'll just dip into your guys' well. Amongst the sort of litany of structural issues that the board has committed to taking on, are there those that rise to the top for you in the most important reforms that the system needs?
Yeah, for sure. I think, I just built in Smuggler. I live a sand wedge away from Patty. And one of the unforeseen consequences that we've had is building permits for RO units. I think that we've built in very unforeseen consequences with not being able to fast track and or subsidize the building permit cost to get people to meaningfully upkeep and or replace their unit. It was almost a non-starter for me and my family, and I just don't get it. It makes no sense to me that we pay the exact same amount as a Red Mountain estate. I definitely believe that there is some incentivizing that can and should happen, and it should never be forced on anybody, but my best intuition tells me that some folks would happily take an incentive as well as a nice unit to downgrade to downsize when they do have dependents that have graduated onto other means of housing. So yeah, and obviously the dependent age, the most recent story that's been in the paper of moving from 24 to 18, I think is super important. We have some sunsetting of some longstanding designation of RO and employee housing designations it's super important to recognize, like when those sunset, how are we going to replace the units? Can we incentivize folks to extend them? I think that I'll be able to add and understand or add to the conversation in a pretty meaningful capacity for all the issues that are bubbling to the top.
Yeah, thank you.
Skippy?
I'm good. I just want to thank him. You guys did ask some good questions. I know you guys will come around again, but thanks for taking the time. We really appreciate it when people reach out to be part of the community and really be involved.
I care a lot about the community.
John?
No questions. They've been answered.
I can throw one more out
Coming
there.
back to Rachel
kind
then?
of round it out. I didn't want Allison to have all the time. We have to be fair.
Yeah. My wife just said she's going to be able to get Cairo, so I can talk. We don't need to rush through this.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In some ways, I've said this to every housing board applicant over time, so it's not new. But the housing board is not really a housing construction creation board. It's more of a management. I mean, there may be an opportunity for that role to change in the future if it was able to go for its own funding sources or things like that. We have a little bit of money here and there, but it's not so much, and that ends up with the city, which has the construction dollars, and the county, which has some mitigation dollars for construction and preservation of housing. I asked this question at the beginning of our retreat as we all start to try to think about the different demands that we're balancing at. But are we creating housing to create a permanent community of children to grandparents? Or are we creating workforce housing? And, is it both? But if we're really going to satisfy those massive demands that we keep hearing about, should the program start to look more down valley and look to less permanent residential housing, more for people who really are just planning on being here 2 or 3 years and going on to somewhere else?
Yeah. No, I think that's a super important question for sure. And so my take, I don't want to be too esoteric about the way I answer it,
It's
but
fine.
I feel first and foremost that any community that can't serve its public servants meaningfully is a community that loses its specialness. Like I said, you end up holding space for the wealthier, more affluent, and the tourist population. And, we're facing serious questions and problems with our retail mix. And so, the streets of Aspen could very easily be argued it's starting to look like Anytown, USA. And I'm not, I know we're not here to talk about that, but, if you start to boil down the importance of housing and the lack of our civic servants being able to rest their head in this community with the retail mix of having all multinational corporations serving the community, pretty soon we're not a funky ski town anymore, and it could be very easily be argued that we've already passed the tipping point. I love this community desperately, and I've worked my butt off I lived in Carbondale, I lived in Willits, I lived in Snowmass, and I just built in Smuggler, and it was a dream of mine, and I worked really, really hard to achieve that dream. So I know that it's possible. But did I get here right at the precipice where it's no longer, possible? And I would love to be a meaningful part of that solution if there is one to be found. So again, I'm not trying to walk around your question.
No, it's a great answer.
Yeah, cool. So so I think I believe very strongly that this summer in particular we felt stressed out. We're at our max. And I know that has to do with extreme weather events and mudslides and
short-term rentals.
Yeah, short-term rentals and 20-year droughts and all this stuff that is happening. But it's also we're on the other obviously the other side, hopefully, of a pandemic that is impacting a lot of things and the airport and now I have a new ASE Vision Committee coming together and it's like what do we do here? It's like it's kind of sort of feels like we're chasing a tin-headed monster. So I view this as one of the pieces of the puzzle that's as important because I think personalities are truly what makes a community. Characters are what makes a community. And I want the teachers. I want the firefighters. I want the policemen. I want those people living in our community. I want them living amongst us. I don't want to just hold space in Aspen proper for the people that are the more aspirational type. So that's sort of again sort of esoteric, broader answer, but that's kind of how I feel.
Yeah, I don't think there's a true right or wrong answer. It's just a chance for people
to
talk about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Kelly.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, you as well.
It's so nice to have you here. Some of the criticism that the APSHA board gets is related to appointees on the board who are in APSHA housing. And I wonder what your thoughts are about that criticism, if it's fair, if it's, it's not fair, if there's an argument to be made on both sides of that and where you fall.
For if the APSHA board is in housing?
If individuals live in housing.
Yeah, if there's a conflict for APSHA board members who are in APSHA housing.
I certainly hadn't considered there would be that. Without I don't know. I think I kind of distinguish the RO capacity of smuggler units as a little different than an APSHA control, even though I know we have to fill out our APSHA documents to initially become part of that community or that little neighborhood. But no, I hadn't considered that in my head. I hadn't really heard that criticism. I would say, almost good luck finding some young professionals that live in Aspen if they don't to be on this board. But no, I think if you focused on your value prop and the values of who you are and what you believe in, it shouldn't totally matter where you live or how you got here. It's I think it's a principled position, and you have to carry those principles proudly and understand them clearly and be able to communicate them clearly. I don't think it should totally matter where you live.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Any other?
The guy had the stumping question here of the round.
I can hear his brain.
Other questions from those that are on Zoom? Greg, Ward, Francie?
Steve has his hand up.
Steve. Go to Steve, please.
Yeah, that's what I'm ready now.
Okay, Steve Russia.
Okay, thank you. And I'll keep my video off, David, so I have better audio connection. from out of state. I'll ask a similar question that I asked Allison about the two big issues facing the valley with the housing, shortage of affordable housing, with estimates from studies from like 2,500 units short to over 4,500 units short. Also, the second big problem being the capital reserve for doing long-term maintenance and improvements to housing projects that we have. Do you have any insights into how you would deal with both of those issues?
Thank you, Steve. You know, one of the things that really surprises me when we get these estimates of units needed, I should know this, and this is exposing a weakness of mine, but what is the total number now, the total number of units? How many?
About 3,000.
Yeah, 3,000. That's the number I had. Right. So, you know, as a percentage of full-time residents, we have such a strong stockpile of housing, and I think that there's been a lot that's gone right over the years, too. I mean, we have a huge inventory of housing. So that number baffles me a little bit, the fact that we would need 3,000 more, because that pretty much represents our entire year-round population. And so without getting too far into it, I do think there are baked-in solutions that haven't been recognized yet with our current inventory. And certainly, you know, there's need for more, and I think we need to hold the feet to the fire for big developments and for worker requirements. And, you know, I think there's very easy steps you can take as well. And, you know, easy is a stretch. But but no, so I would need to understand more, Steve, honestly, about where exactly those numbers come from and how exactly the current inventory is being used, and you know, before I could answer meaningfully and not sound like a ding dong. So I think that it strikes me that we could sharpen up the policies a little bit within the current inventory, and certainly there's more that needs to be done. So, and then as far as the capital reserve, clearly there's you know, Allison answered it very well. Like, people need, you know, their house is their home. You know, this isn't a temporary thing for a lot of people, and so it's very important to have a livable space. You know, so yeah. What is your question about how we should acquire a capital fund, or the importance of it, or what was the specifics of it?
Well, there are different projects have dealt with it in different manners, some with virtually no capital reserve fund, and they have long-term deferred maintenance things that aren't being done that really need doing, with no means to pay for it at this point. Other projects have been, you know, more foresighted, looking long-term, and they do have a healthy capital reserve for taking care of those kind of things. And it's a question that we're having to deal with as elected officials from the city and the county, trying to solve this problem. And we haven't really come up with the final solution for that yet.
Can't we just take it from the Wheeler? Just kidding.
Thinking about that.
No, I know that, you know, Steve, the thing that I feel the most confident about is when you get a group of smart, concerned citizens in the room together, that creative solutions do tend to rise at the top. And, you know, I don't think that any obstacles can't be overcome as far as specific solutions as how to prop up underperforming capital reserves. It would be a long shot for me to give you a specific example of how to do so, but I have a lot of faith in the group that's assembled here that there is a workable solution out there, and it's just about being creative and focusing priorities.
Thanks, David.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Steve.
Yeah, thanks for the answer. I wasn't expecting the final solution from you, but I wanted to see how you answered the question.
Sure.
Thanks, Steve. Maybe one more question from Greg.
Great, thanks, David, and thanks again. I get to be the tie-up again with the off-the-wall question, maybe. I appreciate your answers. It's really been enlightening and great. It's great to learn about you and get to know you. So as a citizen, other than housing, which is clearly an important issue and dear to you as it is to all of us, what other qualities about this place are important to you for living and making a life in this community and making it as unique as we all think it is?
Well, I can say easily the outdoor recreation's the most thing that appeals to me the most. Access to the outdoors is very important to me, and I participate in a lot of the endurance races, and I get my 100-day pin. I'm very committed to being a part of the recreation community, and I think there's no better way to raise a child, or in my case, children, than having them be a part of this community as it relates to access to the outdoors. I mean, it's unparalleled, and I think SkiCo does a total bang-up job for their ABSC programs, and I know they're separate organizations, but I think that our ski programs, our hockey programs, our SkiCo, our mountain biking network, our endurance, community it's not next to nothing I've ever. It's unlike anything I've seen, ever before. So that's super important. I care a lot about media. I'm a big advocate of freedom of the press and holding power to account. And I think that what Aspen has done for me in a lot of ways has given me a seat at a table, certainly a national table, that allows me to engage in a discussion of the importance of hyperlocal media, because Aspen has a lot of cachet, and being a part of a daily newspaper that serves a town like this is a very meaningful part to my life, and quite frankly is my life's work. So I think that I care more than I can say. I think that what makes a town interesting is its arts programs. I think that we have done a wonderful job through the nonprofit sector of creating interesting arts community, and it's really inspiring to see. And retail mix is really important. It's a very important thing to me. I think interesting, just different types of retail mix is super important, and I've seen things that have been done in Park City and Telluride and other communities that I would love to see infiltrate some of the DNA of this community. But all in all, Greg, to answer your question in a nutshell, we have a very engaged citizenship here in Aspen, and people cared so deeply about this. I mean, Allison, obviously, I know very well. We worked together for a long time. And exactly what she said, I hear from citizens every day, 5 a day minimum, and people read every word of this newspaper in this town, both newspapers in this town, and it's incredible. I mean, it's wild that this town supports 2 daily newspapers. It's insane. But so, I think that the people that make up this town are so important. I'm trying to look at Greg in the eye while looking at you guys in the eye too, so I apologize for looking down at my screen.
You can relate.
Look at us. Yeah. We're here.
Yeah. But no, I think the people are what makes it the most special, and I think the people are unique and wonderful, and we just have to make sure that we're protecting them meaningfully.
Thanks.
Thank you, Greg. David, thank you so much.
One last question.
Okay.
Sorry, I just think it's an important one. As you identified in your answer, there's a lot of vocal and oftentimes, but not always, competing interests in this town.
Yep.
And they can be vocal. So the same question we asked Allison, right? Are you comfortable being the recipient of some of that feedback, and how do you make decisions in that environment?
Yeah, I thought Allison's answer was perfect and awesome, and I was proud to have called her a colleague for a long time, so it was great. But no, everyone on this call, Rebecca and Damien and I've worked with every single one of these people very meaningfully throughout my career here, so you have some good candidates on this call. But to answer your question, is I bear the weight of a hyperlocal hard news newspaper, and we oftentimes print what our slogan is: if you don't want to print it, don't let it happen. And there's a lot of times that people don't want to print it, and they let me know about it. It is, again, it's a principled position that you have to choose. It's not a life of luxury necessarily, or if ever, but it is a mission-driven thing that I've chosen and I feel passionately about. I hear again, the problem going second is good answers are already said, but this, you're dealing with something so personal, someone's home. This is their house. And when there's decisions being made by a group that don't live in that house with them, it's going to get personal. It's going to get intense. But all you can do is be principled and be a person of integrity and vote your conscience. And if you do that with honesty and integrity, certainly you're going to be able to weather the bruises that come at you.
Thanks, man.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming in. Appreciate you
Nice to meet
applying.
you.
Great
Thank you.
answers.
Yeah.
Good interview. Thank you so
Saw a
much.
whole new side of you,
Yeah.
neighbor.
Oh, good. All right. Thanks again. You guys have a great night.
Yeah, we just as we pass on the street, now I'm stopping by.
Yeah.
Our next applicant is Rebecca. Rebecca's joining us on Zoom as well. Rebecca, hi. How are you doing? Can you hear us, and can we hear you?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. I'll start off by saying thank you for applying for this position and wanting to be part of your community in this way. So thank you so much for that. And I'll ask the same question that I asked the other applicants. Are you aware of the APSHA meeting schedule and also the roles and responsibilities of APSHA board members?
Thank you. It's an honor to be invited to apply, and I am aware of the requirements and the responsibilities, and look forward to the opportunity, if I have it, to be well prepared and researched. This is definitely not my field. However, the things that I am involved in and the work that I do is extremely connected. So I hope to bring that to the table.
And can you just tell us a little bit about that? What do you see yourself bringing to the table to the APSHA board?
Yeah, so I've been working in nonprofit for 10 years since I've moved here. Actually moved here to work for the Aspen Art Museum in 2010. I went from the arts to the environment, spent 5 years at Wilderness Workshop as their development director. Essentially, I've been fundraising for the Valley's nonprofits, and now I run and founded a foundation called Our Part. It's a private foundation with a philanthropist in the Valley, and we support local and national climate and democracy work.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to council members and commissioners. We can start with anybody in the room. Rachel?
Yes, Rebecca, thank you for all your past work in our community and for applying for the board today. Can you tell me, are you familiar with the current APSHA regulations or guidelines, and have you ever attended an APSHA meeting by Zoom or in person or anything?
I have never attended an APSHA meeting. I do live in APSHA housing. I have actually lived in the Valley in various locations, and this is the first time I'll be exposed to the regulations and the specifics. But as a person that does live in APSHA housing, I know some things. I will say that I have been more and more involved with just reading all the information through what's been reported and paying more attention as of late. I think as some of the other candidates spoke about, this is kind of feels to me a bit of a tipping point in this Valley. I'm not sure if it's the combination of COVID or just how popular our destination, our town is, but to me, housing is a climate issue, it's an economic issue, it's a balance. I mean, there's a lot of important intersections here, and someone coming from the conservation community, I'm very involved and have spent my life's work on the environment and focused on sustaining the ecosystems and our open space. At the same time, I'm a working person here, and I understand the challenges of having an affordable and sustainable life. But I do think that this board is extremely important because of that intersection, and we need to find that balance here. So I will say that I have a lot to learn, but I do feel that I can bring an outside perspective And yeah.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel. Other questions in the room? Ward, go right ahead.
Thank you, Rebecca, for volunteering and having the desire to serve. I'll ask the same question that I asked of Allison. And what do you think the number one issue facing APSHA is now, besides building more units? And what would you offer for a solution?
Well, I have to agree with Allison. I think that the public perception of this board and the function of APSHA needs to be worked on. I think that clarity, I think that communications, I think that engagement with the community in a public forum or coming up with innovative ways to improve this is key. I also understand that there's a transitory community here, and not everyone that comes through our valley has the opportunity to spend time to come to meetings and to learn. So coming up with solutions to engage that community as well on the function of APSHA. I also, like I just mentioned, I feel that, you know, one of the biggest challenges is coming up with this balance and figuring out, well, there is a huge need here, but we also have to be careful about is the growth, the amount of growth that's being proposed, is that really the solution? And so I really think that clarity with the community, and I mean, I think that, you know, maybe dialing back and actually like internally working as a board before making decisions and understanding how best to communicate to the community. To me, I'm sort of talking in circles as I think, but I actually think that to me the interface of the community is number one at this point. Just from an outsider, the negativity towards the board and sort of distrust is prevalent.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Ward. Francie, then Kelly, then Patty.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you so
Hi,
much
Francie.
for applying. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
So it's quite a bit different being on the APSHA board than being on environmental causes. I mean, they can be controversial too, you know, the whole mountain biking thing and everything, but, you know, I have found it surprisingly public. It's a very public position. It's actually in some ways more public than being a county commissioner because, as Allison talked about, people's heart are in their houses, and so they follow the APSHA board pretty closely. Maybe the health board during COVID was a little bit more antagonistic, but you're going to be out there. You're going to say something in a meeting and it's going to show up in the paper, and then people are going to respond, or the board might make a decision and people for whom that decision was not favorable are going to respond pretty vociferously. It's a very vociferous town, as you may probably know. So I'm just wondering how you feel you're going to deal with that yourself on an emotional level, and how you're going to carry that weight.
Thanks, Francie. Yeah, and I appreciate just all the honesty on this particular subject coming from your experience. I will say that as a fundraiser, doing that work is hard, and it's working with people, and it's standing up and asking hard questions and hearing no's, and also being judged and criticized. And I would say it's a little different than holding public office, but with the amount of interface I've had with the public, not just the wealthy, but the whole public, to do the work that I've done, I feel that I have had a lot of experience chameleoning between personalities and handling criticism and balancing personalities and judgment. I will say that I have never been in this, I have never to date been in a particular situation such as what I'm saying quoted in the paper, et cetera. So I would simply just do the best I could and assume, I think to me this is doing the hard work, and doing this type of public service is not a lot of people have the guts for that. And so just keeping in my mind that I have the intention to really serve and not let that stuff take me down. So.
Thank you, Francie. Kelly, and then Patty.
Thanks. Hi, Rebecca. I think we've met briefly before, but nice to see you. And I guess I'll say, I'm still a firm believer that APSHA has a lot of silent cheerleaders out there. And we're trying to figure out how we sort of like marshal and unearth them or whatever as part of our challenge. But I would say, one of the things that I've found a little surprising on APSHA, and I'd be curious if you've had similar other experiences, is this is it can be a very technically wonky board. Like the questions that we are analyzing can get into the weeds. And for me, sometimes it feels like pulling, trying to you pull a thread and you sort of try to follow, like, what is the logical conclusion of when I pull this thread that I can see? And then also, what is the logical conclusion of pulling this thread that I can't see? What are the unintended consequences here? So, trying to really get into that analytical, kind of logical effort to figure out what the impacts of decisions are is how I find APSHA's work to take place a lot of the times. And I'm wondering if you've had similar experience in either your work life or on boards that you've served on, where you get into the weeds on those technical matters that deeply.
Yeah, well, I would be, first of all, excited, honestly, to, this would be an incredible education for me on a lot of levels, but I would be excited to spend the time to do the work, to actually be able to participate and help make decisions and come ultra prepared. And I think it would be exciting to have that challenge. I have spent the last couple of years working pretty heavily in local politics and national politics, not under the foundation since we're a C3, but as an individual. And it was pretty interesting to work as a part of several different campaigns. And I think that, after that experience, understanding the sort of tactical pieces to a campaign and taking one step in one direction, one to the other, and the impacts. And it was a great learning experience. It's not the exact same thing as this board. However, it broadened my view of just, the impacts of making decisions or going one direction, not the other. I've spent quite a bit of time working on CD3 here in Colorado, as well as other Senate races, and some that won and some that haven't. So I would bring that to the experience, and I think a lot of it would be a big learning curve, and I'd be excited to take that challenge.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Patty?
Yeah, would you like me to wrap it up?
You can try.
Yeah, good luck, right? I'm sure. I want to thank you. I don't think I've had the opportunity to meet you, Rebecca, so it's nice to meet you virtually. It'd be great to meet you in person, and hopefully some campaigns were going on, or who knows where, but it would be great. I think it's very brave of you to jump in here, and I not only appreciate it, I understand it, and I welcome braveness. So again, my thanks to you for coming before us today. We've had great interviews, and you're right in there with good answers to tough questions. And again, I appreciate your taking the time.
Thank you so much.
Steve?
Nope, well, I tried.
Thank you. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Steve.
I'm going to ask a different question this time. You probably had your answer all ready for what you thought I might ask. But since you live in APSHA housing, you must see things and hear things that people who don't live in APSHA housing don't see, don't hear. Just talking to your neighbors, being there, interacting interacting with people looking for housing in the housing pool. Do you have any insights that you could give to us or to the APSHA board that would be kind of unique to your just where you live and your experience living there?
Good question. I will go back to the sort of communications clarity piece, and I think that some folks that have attempted or have, joined the lottery, not won, and folks that have been in APSHA for many years or maybe married into APSHA, which would be my case. My husband got our unit before we met many years ago. There's a lot of confusion in terms of rules and categories, and also kind of faith that there is a board that, and clearly now I'm understanding that, you guys are working super hard to move this in the right direction, and I think it would be fantastic for the folks that are in housing to understand that. I feel that people are on some level defensive and a little afraid of having things taking away from them, or again, the kind of hesitance to put money into their unit so things are not falling apart, et cetera, et cetera. I think like having a conversation about how we can look forward and encourage that, figuring out incentives and ways to really strengthen that. I think so I feel like people do feel very lucky to have the housing, and understanding now how difficult, it is, living here and trying to get housing here is virtually impossible. Whatever housing that was left, and I used to be someone that rented in free market for many years, is completely sucked up. So I think there's a lot of frustration and exhaustion and fear, and I think even folks in housing feel that, could something be taken away from me, or there's no incentive for us to fix up anything, even though we want to make a nice home for ourselves. These are all people who are committed to living here. They're raising children here, and they're staying. And I do understand that there's a transitory community and housing needed for people that live here for 1 or 2 years. And if we can come up with a way to provide something for them, but I do think there should be a diversity of options, and maybe some of those options are down valley, more of those options. There is a huge amount of, there's still a large population of people who live here full time, who are making their home here, who have been here for a long time, who need APSHA to stay here and to continue to live here. And those are not transitory people. Those are people holding very serious jobs. My husband and I have had, we have very serious careers. I moved here for my career. We still rely on this system to be able to survive here. So I guess back to your question, Steve, I think clarity, I think some kind of gaining back some trust, and I think an explanation of maybe understanding of what how the board is serving the community, and I don't know if that's like a couple public discussions or outreach to individuals that live in homes directly, but something is getting missed, and I know people are so busy and they're trying to sustain their lives. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Greg, you had your hand up a moment ago. Did you?
I did. I think Steve covered it, and I'm really happy to hear everything I've heard from you, Rebecca. Thank you so much, and it's great that you're a student, and I appreciate that you're a student in a quick study. I understand that about you, and I think that's an important facet to bring here. I guess the last thing I'd just say is, what else do you do in this community? What else is important to you about this community?
Well, as much, I did come here for a job, however, and that was when I was in the arts. And part of the reason why I feel like I could always live here is that this community is so special. We have a tremendous cultural, obviously, history. And that's a huge reason why I came. I don't think I could have moved from my early career in New York City to a small mountain town that didn't have the arts and the thinking and the music and the people that want to be here that are coming from all over the place, and the people that visit here too that bring color. I will say that I am also a big outdoors person, and the access to the wilderness and open space in our surroundings is extremely important to me. And not just wilderness for recreation, but wilderness for ecosystems and wildlife and preserving what we have left of this beautiful country and the West. So that's always been about another intersection of balance that I've fought for, which is, yes, outdoor rec is an industry, and we live in a place where we've surrounded ourselves with all these opportunities and built an economy around it, but we also will we will lose the quality of this place if we just develop constant trails and more housing and everything else. So this is a total balance. And I think that, my work in conservation and in fundraising for those organizations, that's been an issue at the core, which is I am a user of all these activities and interface with nature on a daily basis for my health, but we have to figure out how to sustain this place.
Great, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Greg.
Last question. Thanks, Rebecca. I'm a firm believer that there are 3 existential threats to the future of Aspen as we know it, and they are governance, the environment, and housing. And I'm so intrigued that you've chosen to dedicate your professional life to 2 of those, government reform and environmental reform. You're super qualified for any board, so why housing and why now in particular?
Thanks, Skippy. Well, to be honest, I don't have enough hours in the day to run for county commissioner. So, no, this community is extremely important to me. And
she's in my district. Wait a minute.
This community is super important to me. This valley is super important to me. In fact, anywhere I choose to live, I want to be an active community member, and I really care about the future of what we build here and what we hold dear to us, and keeping this place sustainable while livable, and coming up with creative solutions that are appropriate for this special town. And we are a very unique, special place. I think that this board offers an amazing challenge and opportunity to think about those solutions and to look at, to me, all the issues that are so important to me, many of which you just suggested. But I will say, instead of the environmental, say climate, to me, housing is a direct connection. I mean, in fact, housing is a climate issue, and the climate issue is a housing issue. So I really feel like I can bring my background and skill sets to this board in a way that some of the other candidates who have potentially, direct experience with this board can't. And that's just because of my own work and the time I spend with leaders and experts in the climate space, in the democracy space. Every single nonprofit in this valley I've touched or worked with almost. So I feel like I understand a lot of different aspects of the community, and feel that I can bring my skill sets to the board, and feel that the board is really an incredible place an opportunity to improve and keep this community healthy and strong.
Thank you.
Thanks, Skippy. Rebecca, thank you so much for your application, your willingness to serve on this board, and thank you for taking the time to interview with us tonight. You're an extremely qualified candidate, and we thank you for stepping up to the plate to take part in this. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you all. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks. We do have a 4th applicant, but I'm not seeing him in the room or on our Zoom. at this time. That's Damian Williamson. And so we will go ahead and conclude our interviews with Rebecca then. We will go back and talk amongst our individual boards.
He said that the thunderstorm, this works at the airport, so the thunderstorm screwed up a ramp at the airport, and he had to run to clear the plane and is trying to lock back in momentarily. So maybe back.
Well, we will have the opportunity for him to get in touch with us if there's a conflict with his interview today. So we will get back with our individual boards and talk amongst ourselves about appointees as well. And I think, Kelly, you were saying that the application could stay open. There is an opportunity for more interviews if that's the direction that we wanted to go. So keeping that in mind.
From what I know from admin, it's open through Friday.
Okay. Great candidates.
Good interviews.
You know, I have to say, like, sitting on the AFSHA board and all the bad press, this to me is like a sign that it's not so scary. Like, if great people are willing to sit on this board, like,
and give them a week or so.
Scary.
It's pretty damn scary.
You're handling it with such grace, Francie. Every damn meeting.
I don't know how I ended up there, but wow, it's some trip.
You're doing great.
I'm glad none of them ran for council. I would have had a tough go.
There you go.
Amazing candidates,
right?
Yeah.
Really.
Yes.
It's an amazing board right now.
You could take those three and make a 7-member board, and it would be fantastic.
Okay,
all
so
right.
we have a half hour.
So we do. We have a little bit of time. We're going to get on to the next part of our agenda, which is really just to have some discussion. Kelly and I have spoken a little bit over the last 2 weeks, and we talked about just some items that we want to get conversation going around. We want to hear from you guys as a city council. We want to hear from the county. There's a lot of overlap that we have, and there's opportunities for us to work together on stuff, but also just to talk with you guys and hear what you're thinking and what's going on with your mind. But before we get to that, we want to talk about the Airport Advisory Board.
Yeah, we just wanted to do a quick, Rich, you can come up, I'll take it and then fill in anything I miss. But as many of you know, as part of the airport visioning process, one of the key recommendations that we adopted was to create an advisory board for the airport. And this is a board that, similar to all of our other citizen boards, we expect to continue on sort of in perpetuity, but also through this visioning process and into the future. And when we wrote our bylaws, we identified positions for each of our municipalities to appoint ex officio members to that advisory board. And so we want, to invite you guys to do that, and Rich can talk a little bit more about that, and then also just advise the application process is currently open for the public to apply for those seats, and I think it will be open until September 9th. Or 3rd, there and around, okay, September 3rd. And if you have any questions, Rich Engelhardt, our Deputy County Manager, can answer them.
Sure, thank you, Kelly, and board members and council. Yeah, just real quickly, we are asking you to make an appointment or a recommendation, actually, for the board to do the appointing of an individual. It would be an ex officio, non-voting representative. We're going to set them up on staggered terms, so they'll come from the town of Snowmass Village, Basalt, and City of Aspen. And so they'll set up on these staggered terms. Mm-hmm. I guess everybody can leg wrestle to see who starts at what year, I guess. But at any rate, we are looking for somebody that maybe has some administrative or technical experience regarding the airport itself. And I have sent out the bylaws. I sent them to your city manager of each of the municipalities. It kind of gives specifics in there related to the type of position and what it entails. So, like Kelly said, we're opening it up until the 3rd. Right now, we have 17 applications just from the general public. So it's
really?
As we all know, it's an exciting opportunity, and so there's a lot of interest in it. So.
How many folks do you anticipate being on the board?
There's 7 members. voting members and then 3 ex officio members. And then the board also allowed us to add 2 alternates to represent in case a voting member was unable to attend. So.
And what do you anticipate as the meeting schedule?
You know, we have not finalized that yet. I believe we had up to meeting once a month to start out with, and then I think it backs off from there. So it'll be highly active to begin with, given the work that we're going to be doing out there.
Let me ask a question. What was the logic behind having the 7 citizen members be voting and then the elected representatives be ex officio?
Well, let's like Kelly answered this, but I think just in the discussions with the board is trying to keep it, a manageable group. I think you've been involved in larger boards, and so just the thought of having the 7 voting members. Also, I think as a representative, as an ex officio representative to the city, sometimes if they're voting members, it makes it a little complicated without having to come back and get the full
I'm just thinking it's an awful lot of time commitment to ask someone to participate in dialogues and then never be able to affect the vote or the outcome of the same dialogues.
Yeah, I think they're gonna, I would anticipate that they would lean on these individuals because, again, we're asking for somebody that really has some familiarity and that they would look at them as a kind of a subject matter expert to lean on them and give some advice. So
Yeah.
I think that's what we're hoping for. Yeah.
Yeah, and to further that, Rich is absolutely right. When you get, like, with me being on Board of Health, Greg and I, we come back to the Board of Commissioners when we have voting decisions so that we get the input from the board. And so we were hoping with the airport to not have the electeds have to say, well, I really can't vote on it now, I have to come back, because we might have a time frame here to get this airport going, depending upon support from the federal government, from the state government, as far as funding. So some of our actions might need to happen at the board meetings without having to bring it back a month later.
And so as an advisory board, will their decisions then be certified by your board later, or they have holding power as soon as they're passed by the advisory board?
Depends on the issue, I think, before them. It's all in the bylaws, and any of those major things would definitely come back to the Board of Commissioners, as do most decisions when it comes to that.
Thank you.
Is BOCC making the 7-person appointments?
Yes, in fact, I understand the way it would work is you would make a recommendation on who you want to represent that board. They would then make that appointment.
We have to formally adopt it.
Formally appoint them.
But we're interviewing all 17 or 1,700 people that may apply by the end of the day.
And I'd like to offer, we also wanted to allow the board to have representation from down the valley, so it doesn't stop at just Picken County. There is a balance on the board where the voting membership is a majority of residents in Picken County, but that, to keep the numbers manageable and also let the representation sort of spread out, since the airport is such an asset beyond our borders, to strike that balance too.
Okay. Thank you.
And I have to also just add, one of the reasons was Tori during this process was always, questioning and talking to us about where does the city come into play. And so when looking at this advisory board, we took that to heart and said we need to have somebody from the municipalities be present in the room and part of this, because, as Kelly said, what happens at the airport affects us, everyone valley-wide. So we thought that was an important factor to have on this board.
I don't understand the request. So there's a 7-member board, and one of those members would represent the city of Aspen, but it would be a non-elected official, and you're asking us to make a recommendation for who that would be?
You are going to make a recommendation on an ex officio member. There's 7 voting members and 3 ex officios representing the different municipalities. Non-voting, right?
So you're saying it could be city council members or it could be city staff, but you're asking the city to put on an ex officio member.
Yeah, and again, I think we're...
City gets to recommend to us.
From the city itself, like city of Aspen, not the, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
All right. Hi, Francie, go ahead.
I thought that it was going to be one of the elected officials, not somebody that they would designate. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, I think the board had decided, in fact, Kelly, if you want to talk to that, you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to the city. I think that the thought was that this board can get very technical, and so counselors may not want to be quite in the weeds on such operational and technical questions related to aviation safety design and lighting and blah, 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 things like that. And so it's their kind of prerogative to make that recommendation. But it could be staff.
Okay,
or
thanks for that clarification.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking more about finding the continuity of the membership based on schedules, frankly, and depends on when the meeting date is set. I mean, I'm basically working 4 to 5 days a week on top of council now, and so it all depends on when the meetings are. We might have more continuity by having a staff member who can be there and be committed every time, but I don't know. We haven't just talked about it yet. We'll talk
We
about it
took
later.
that into consideration,
Appreciate that.
the schedules and busyness of all of us.
Steve?
So there are a couple thoughts I've had. One is that the fact that the city would be appointing a person to be an ex officio member wouldn't preclude a city council member from actually applying as a private citizen to serve on the board. And I know we are looking for people with, some good background in aviation issues, as well as local issues are related to the airport. So if someone on the council was so inclined, they could apply and could get appointed separately from the city's recommendation for an ex officio member. Also, we anticipate that there will be subcommittees being created about specific topics from time to time. One good example might be the design of a new terminal, where we would be seeking a much broader public input on that and would have subcommittees which could be lots of other people from the community who aren't on the airport advisory committee, who then would be making recommendations to the airport advisory committee and to the commissioners. So there are lots of other opportunities beyond just the seven seats that we'll be picking people for here.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, well, we have not spoken about it. I know Ward and myself both served on the Vision Committee. I've spoken to John. I know John has interest in this as well, so we'll probably have to have a little conversation amongst ourselves, and we'll get back to you.
I just want to give you a heads up.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
We have a little bit of time left. I just wanted to throw out a couple of items that came up between Kelly and I, and these are things that were coming from both boards that we want to just put on our radar to be able to talk about at some time. And these are areas of overlap: traffic and the entrance to Aspen. We want to have conversation with the county and find out where your thinking is. Truly, the entrance to Aspen doesn't just start where the sign says city limits. So we want to engage in that conversation with you guys and find out where the county is thinking and what your interest is there going forward.
Yeah, it's a huge discussion, as we all know from the other night, when it comes to talking about the traffic management and the entrance. And so this is just in its early stages, have been thinking about, the talk about the record of decision and the management of laneage, and in light of what's happening in the Glenwood Canyon, thinking that maybe this might be a good time for us to try a pilot program, a couple of months, 3 months or so, at the entrance, if we can get permission to look at laneage and how we might be able to open the traffic flow coming and going from the roundabout. No specifics as to where it would start, where it would end, and how it would work, just to see if we can get some cooperation from the feds to do this trial program during the closure of Glenwood Canyon to help alleviate. It's not going to stop the number of cars, but we'll see if it does improve the flow of traffic. And if it works, and we see it works, then we can decide on what next steps may be. But it may not even be allowed. We may not even be allowed to do a trial, but I thought it was something worth looking into, and when we get more information, we'll be bringing it
You're
back.
talking about opening up the HOV lane to general traffic?
Not, who knows, or just the bus merge lanes,
knows?
nothing specific, but can we address any of the issues that are specific to the record of decision during this time of emergency because of the Glenwood Canyon closures and the impacts of increased traffic on top of our already high traffic levels. So it's just a question that, we're throwing out there, and I've talked with staff, and it may get us nowhere, but we don't know yet. But I just thought I'd let you guys know that it might be something we'll be bringing back for discussion.
I think that becomes a real big RAFTA discussion as well if we're going to start using the bus-only lane for other traffic.
If that'll be part of it, if we can even get there.
Yeah.
I'm going to just list off a couple of the items that we wanted to talk about, and then we can, just hear from anybody that wants to chime in on different issues. But we talked about traffic and entrance to Aspen, the AABC, the lumberyard, looking at it in a holistic planning view. Lots going to be going on out there at the airport. You've got more development that's at the CMC fire station. So just wanted to check in with the county and see where your feelings are about that. Are there items for collaboration? One obviously is transit, and we'll come back to that. What Kelly has written here as Tier 2 housing. We want to talk to the county about housing, about opportunities through the county, with the county. Even just in the conversation that we had tonight with the interviewees that we had, there was mention twice about potential down valley development of housing. For us, that's always been a difficult conversation. The UGB using Aspen tax dollars to be building further out than that is a question maybe philosophical for some people. But we want to know how we can work together with the county and see where we can be an assistant there and vice versa. Childcare is on this list. The city is, first of all, the city council adopted childcare and creation of childcare facilities as one of our top 3 goals in our retreat that we just had. We are identifying the parcel that has been set aside at Burlingame for development of childcare. There's also other opportunities perhaps with the school district that have come about. And again, we're just interested in talking to the county of what the county feeling is about childcare, creation of childcare, and again, if there's any opportunities for partnership there. Also in Tier 2, climate action. Again, in our retreat, we have adopted climate action, reduction of greenhouse gases, and also solid waste management as one of our top 3 goals. So actually Tier 2 here are our 3 goals: housing, childcare, and climate action. On climate action, for example, the overlap there is quite obviously the county-run landfill facility, and what you guys are trying to do with incentivizing whether it's compost or construction and demo waste, but really you guys control the end facility there. So we just may be looking to you for a little bit of guidance and support in some of the programs that we are trying to get going on. And Tier 3.
Oh, she's adding to Tier 2, I can see it.
Tier 3 is yours.
I have noted the SOS encampment for future discussion, and I just want to acknowledge these aren't reflective of priorities, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. They're sort of just my personal notes, and the feeling was that the items, for me, that I had listed in Tier 2, we would benefit from having a more teed up conversation for future agendas between our boards. I think about really, let's dig in and dive in, and we can roundtable this today, but I see them as being fully worthy of fleshing out a conversation and figuring out points of decision in future agendas, and particularly with climate action. In the next couple of months, the county is more formalizing our community-based climate action plan rather than the climate action plan that we've had that's been internally focused. And so it probably makes sense to let us do that work, and then I'll come to see where there's alignment and things that we can all work on together. So those aren't reflective of priorities or anything. It's just more of how robust of a conversation I thought we would all benefit from. And yeah.
So, since we just have a couple minutes, Rachel?
Yeah, thanks. I'll just throw maybe one other thing onto your list, which I think really should be tier one, and that's water and water availability. I mean, it's great we're getting the rains and the monsoons now, but it's a long-term issue. And, you know, you all know what's been happening with emptying out Blue Mesa and the other reservoirs to keep Powell going. And, you know, those reservoirs will probably never refill to their current level, given what we're seeing in climate. And, you know, I know, and you all know how passionately I felt about water issues and passing the 10th of a cent. But we, the city, don't have our own independent source now of doing a lot on water quality or water issues, although we are funding that through April Long's efforts. So I just think, I know there had been discussions of different possibilities of how to deal with dewatering of the Roaring Fork and the critical stretches before it hits town, but those aren't conversations we've ever had jointly, and I don't know where they're going or how we can do things or what. I just think that both for the public understanding the lay of the land of the water situation, and then I would set it up in such a way that we have executive session time as two boards and can really talk about how we move some things forward. But, you know, the Front Range is as thirsty as ever, and they're not quite giving up on their plans to continue to try to take out of, you know, our side of the hill. And the demand management side of things has a good, strong likelihood of killing West Slope Ag, you know, and that West Slope is going to be the water source for Lake Powell and really hurt the economics of communities across the West. So I think water really needs to be at the top of the thing. You know, I think that I agree with certainly looking at the entrance to Aspen, and I was surprised when I read the story in the newspaper when Jason had said it hadn't been talked about since 2017 meeting, which is kind of like the last meeting I remember, where they talk about how many buses you will need going in and out of Aspen daily to maintain the same mode shift that we had hoped to maintain. And you're going to get to a point where it's more buses than cars and trucks, you know, frankly. So there was always that magic crossover of when buses and light rail would start to be equally competitive. But I really want to just kind of look back at it as much as anything to see what the how the growth projections in population came out or not for the valley, and what we would need to be planning for to see how accurate it was. And the last thing I'm going to say on that, I have two things to say, but one on that is that I recall when the public did vote for light rail and realigned traffic lanes across the Merle. And John Bennett was in leadership of the community at the time. And of course, you know, light rail seems so much sexier or perhaps more quality than buses, you know, and people were fairly excited about it. But the realignment included something for the car drivers, included something for people, whether they had 3 kids in the back seat or not, in that they were going to get realigned as well. And it wasn't going to be the 2 right-hand turns. So it was a grand bargain. No, you're not getting your unrestricted 4-lane that some drivers wanted, but we're getting mass transit, you know, and so both sides got something enough to win to want to move it forward. When we came out of that last meeting, EOTC, it sounded like some people want us to just, you know, punish cars left and right at every single moment so that they stop using them. And whether we go up to $10 an hour parking or $5 to enter town, and, you know, and I'm just thinking, oh, you know, you get to that point and the public will just reverse it. The public won't hold as long as if everybody feels that they gained something and not one person's a winner on transit and I'm a car person because I have a bad hip and I'm a loser. You know, that's what we have to avoid in that. But I think re-looking at it and updating it as needed, and maybe temporary accommodations for where we're at now would make some sense. And the last thing I will say is that in many ways, I've learned over time partnership is code word for funding. You know, we need funding for childcare, we need funding for housing, we need funding for the housing office. We'll probably need more funding for water. So we'll keep going in partnership, but I just wanted to make sure that wasn't a rude surprise later. Thank you.
Just tell us where to get the funds.
Hey, and I've got an answer to that. So,
Kelly.
thanks. Yeah, I hear ya. I think about money a lot and work of money a lot. So my hope is that, in particular, I'm hoping that maybe the American Rescue Plan funds give us a near-term opportunity to help to work together on childcare. That we'll be getting we've gotten a partial and we'll get a more direct allocation from that has to be spent quickly. And then, we're working on beefing up our housing impact fee fund, which is only so much, but also hopefully having some dedicated staff. I've worked very hard on trying to get state money allocated because there's a ton of state money now, $400 million, $550 million in the next couple of years at the state level on housing that I think we could be very well poised to be better partners. And the county is a really good, we are positioned well to access that, And so, I hear it loud and clear, and I know I personally am focused on it and hope that we see some transformation in our ability to partner, throughout the valley in the coming years.
Well, I think we're going to be going hand in hand to everyone we can in the community and throughout the valley who need and use the child care facility. So it's not directed only at the county by any means. And similar to you, that's part of why I'm bringing up the entrance, is because I think we're seeing more infrastructure money coming down federally in the next few years than we will for another decade and a half. And just to not even be on the list at the Intermountain Transportation Region meetings, because we're not going to have a problem. These things, if we visualized as a group something that really would work and was going to be satisfactory today, we'd be lucky to have it operational 12 or 15 years from now. That's the thing. I'm just trying to push the conversation into the future where we need to be planning for it.
Francie?
Yeah, I just want to speak for a minute as I think the only Down Valley person in this meeting. I want to talk a little bit about how, the county is very Aspen-centric, as it should be, because it's the major employer and everybody's going to Aspen. All the cars are going to Aspen. But in terms of housing, I really think it's important that we consider out-of-county investments, because most of our workers come from out of county. And I've said this before at BOCC meetings, that a lot of the tradespeople, the contractors, the subcontractors, the workers, they really don't want to live in Aspen. They want to live down valley, where they can actually live on a piece of property that they can walk out the door and it's their own little piece of property. And so I think affordable housing down valley is really important for the sustainability of the Aspen workforce. That yes, it's really important that we have up valley housing, and it's when I hear people talk about it who are in affordable housing, it just really moves me how much it means to them to be there. But there are people who want to sacrifice the time on the road for the ability to live down valley. So I just really want to push for that, because there are so many people down here, even outside of Pitkin County. I mean, I live in Pitkin County, obviously, but people who don't live in Pitkin County who contribute to your workforce, that I think it's really important that we keep that front and center and think about those workers and how can we improve their lives, not just through intergovernmental agreements and stuff, but actually as the town of Aspen and the county of Pitkin to make it work for those people too. And I think housing is one way to do it. Obviously, child care is also, but I just wanted to speak specifically about the housing. It came up when Tori was doing his introduction. So thank you.
Thanks, Francie. Greg?
Yeah, well, so obviously we've got, what have we just listed here? I don't know how many hundreds of hours of conversation, and it's all important. And so without getting into specifics here, I just want to try to encourage everyone to direct our staff to help us create the framework to really start having these conversations. We've talked about super important stuff. Certainly what's happening with the ABC and the lumber yard and west of Maroon plan and all that have certainly come to forefront as Lumberyard is moving forward. Climate action, of course, is important. Child care, it's all really important. High energy density compost should be processed at our landfill. Anything that's compostable should be composted, as far as I'm concerned, regarding the city's plans for composting. I can go down the list. So this is all important. So rather than try to knock it all out in one night, why don't we let's come up with a way to move forward so we can really start sinking our teeth into some of these things, because this is all really important, and I'm not going to put one in front of the other. Rachel, I really appreciate your water discussions, and I also want to say what you've done for water in our community already and for the entire Western Slope has been huge, and I'm so glad you're still here working on that and thinking forward, as well as you are with transportation and all the rest of it. So how do we get our staffs in concert to help us move forward? Because I'll share anecdotally, the last conversation, we heard the conversation about the staff saying they were shut down in the last conversation regarding what was happening at the ABC in the Lumberyard a couple of years ago. And I heard the verbatim from both sides that, okay, if things are shutting down, it's up to us to get them reopened and refocused. And nobody's fault, not pointing any fingers. It's mostly, how do we get this conversation going again so we don't create a bigger problem with the solutions we're looking at now? And I don't have the answer to that. I'm just reaching out and asking for it.
Thank you, Greg. And, I would say that this is a start. This is a start to that. We do these meetings not too regularly enough for the items that are in front of us. So this is a good start. I think that Kelly and I will probably get together again and kind of discuss that, about how to make the framework to keep these issues moving forward, because it's very difficult for us to work together when we don't meet as often as we should. But Greg, your points are well taken. Thank you so much. Skippy?
Yeah, I just want to second that. I think that this is a tremendous list, and I'm still pretty new, 2 years in, but it's been very little time working together. And we are one county, we're one valley. These things are highly interconnected, as evidenced by this list, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the airport, where people are going to and coming from, the lumberyard, where people are living or shopping, housing, where should we put it, childcare, where do we drop our kids and pick them off, climate, where do we take our trash, the zoning, what are we building, who's coming in to build that, right? I mean, all of these things are related very specifically in the transit corridor, and how we address them in a holistic way will have a big impact on whether we are successful or we fail in meeting our shared priorities and goals. I mean, just to take one example, when we think about like the lumberyard, right, which obviously I'm a big supporter of, but there are very different outcomes on that same parcel that support housing. If we have 300 families who would have otherwise lived near the core, who have multiple cars and gear and kids, well, we may have helped their housing, but we've hurt our environmental goals, our transit goals, and in our lived-in community goals, because that's going to create the desire for businesses to pop up at the ABC. They're going to become more of those people that are like, I don't want to go into Aspen. But if we look at it holistically and recognize, well, that's a spot for lower category service workers, rentals early in their career, which are currently driving or taking the bus from Rifle. Well, now we're working on all of our goals, right? And that's just one example that I'm more familiar with, but how we address each of these needs to be in concert. And so I'm really eager to dig in and work with you guys. I love the suggestion about finding a framework with staff. I think this is the time. And then the last sort of the cherry I want to put on that, just because I just came from an awesome 3-hour discussion with Joe Edwards, was the initial vision, other than the downzoning and APSHA, it was around transit and it was around the core. And it was a vision for a walkable town and a way in there. And I still think that is the vision that we will ultimately end up at. And it's something that we should be aiming at that will require an integrated transit solution to achieve. So I think we have some exciting work ahead of us.
You need to read the 1972 National Geographic article about
I have it
management.
right here.
It's great.
Thank you for those comments. Is this the new airport director in the room?
Yeah, we have a
Fly
meeting.
on over.
We have a meeting with him at
Fly
6
on
o'clock.
Do this.
Dan, come up. We're meeting with him at 6, so you know.
This is your next meeting?
Well,
Yeah.
that's now.
We're about
So we're gonna meet with him.
I just wanted to
Perfect.
get a chance to say hello. Rachel Richards,
Hi.
John Doyle. I'm Tori. This is Skippy Mesereau.
Ward's
and
on the
Ward
screen.
Howenstein is in Maine. Yep, he's that guy waving at
Just
you.
spin the camera maybe so Ward can see
But
him.
just wanted to say hello since we had an opportunity to meet you. Welcome to the community.
Oh, thank you. It's very nice to meet all of you.
Thank you for coming up for our next meeting.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now.
Um,
You've seen one
And-
airport, you've seen one airport.
what's that?
If you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport.
No, coming from the Reno airport to here, I don't know.
And we are at 6 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and adjourn. I had one question, and I'm kind of looking back at John. As we talk about these issues that were on this list, traffic, entrance to Aspen, one question I was wondering, is the airport redevelopment, is there opportunity or consideration of parking? Would that be an opportunity for an intercept lot, if you will, or is that something that is
John,
not,
you need to be on camera.
or is that something that's not possible
Do you want me to answer it for you?
on that property?
Nothing is impossible, but there are certainly barriers. And so property that has been acquired with FAA dollars has to be used for FAA purposes and/or it needs to be purchased or bought at a market rate if it's going to be for a community purpose. And so it would just be something that we would need to keep in mind. I think right now the Vision Committee's plan to push more to the east leaves even less room for parking. And so we've had to move the vehicle parking around. And so right now we're not contemplating additional community parking or intercept lot parking. However, we do still have the buttermilk lots, and if there were going to be structured parking or such, because at the airport it'd have to be structured to create the volume, there could be an opportunity there that it is very close.
Thank you.
Structured means multi-level above ground.
Yeah,
So if we
if
got a
you
water
wanted to
table there and
increase
we got flat path.
capacity from where it is today, you could look at something like that there.
Thank you for that answer.
You know, I think some of the original EIS work anticipated parking lots of up to 3,000 spaces between Buttermilk, the airport, and Brush Creek, and that was anticipating the valley's growth. I mean, straight up, you know, but we are seeing, you know, different plans out there floating around to say, hey, what if you took all the lumberyard parking and put it over on the airport land and then built a big sky cross to walk over to get your car? Then there could be more lumberyard land to build housing. But I've just said, I don't think that we really can utilize the airport land for those purposes.
Yeah, so that's correct. For the two reasons, really, the east side has become a lot more congested, compressed with the Vision Committee's plan. And the board has adopted a resolution, and we are committed to pursuing that Vision Committee plan.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for that.
Good job, Tori.
All right, we are just after the hour, so we're going to call it and adjourn our meeting this evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Nice to see you all. Yeah, cheers.
Thank you all.
Oh, y'all.
Thank you, Ward.
Bye, Ward.
Is that Garnet?